the NATO summit this week. He's faced increased scrutiny about his mental acuity since the disastrous presidential debate with former President Donald Trump. A few congressional Democrats have said they don't think Biden should continue running for president. This morning, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi praised Biden for his work at this week's NATO gathering, but she also repeatedly urged the president to make a decision about whether to continue his candidacy.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
She spoke to MSNBC, but Biden has doubled down on his insistence that he is staying in the presidential contest. Forecasters say nearly all of the West is under extreme heat advisories or warnings. Las Vegas may set a record today. This may be the fifth day in a row Vegas sees temperatures of 115 degrees or hotter. The heat wave has created more hardship for people in Oregon who are homeless. Oregon Public Broadcasting's Tiffany Kamhai reports.
People experiencing homelessness are more vulnerable to the elements, and for the past few days in Oregon, that's meant enduring dry, triple-digit heat. Officials in Central Oregon's Deschutes County distributed cooling kits, water, hydration tablets, and cooling packs. Emily Horton is with the county.
We recognize that a lot of people can't access cooling spaces for whatever reason. They don't want to leave their stuff. They don't have transportation. We try to remove as many of those barriers as we can.
Several counties throughout Oregon opened up emergency cooling shelters. Some even put up homeless residents in hotel rooms. For NPR News, I'm Tiffany Kamhai in Portland.
On Wall Street, stocks are higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now up nearly 42 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Newberry's locally loved Pink House is on the auction block today. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has owned the dilapidated building and 9 acres of surrounding marsh and tidal creek for 13 years. The agency had originally hoped to use it for seasonal staff housing, but couldn't move forward in part because of asbestos contamination. Newberry Select Board Chair Alicia Greco says the community has been passionate about keeping the Pink House in its picturesque setting.
It's on the Merrimack River on the marsh with the sky behind it. I have a piece of artwork with the storm rolling in over it. Somebody took a photograph. I have it framed. And it's sad. It's going to be sad.
The uninhabited home in the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge was built in 1925, has been a favorite of local artists for decades. That auction started just about an hour ago. If you happen to see a line of pickup trucks piled high with furniture and other bric-a-brac, fear not. It's not an invasion of the Beverly Hillbillies. It's just folks making their way to or from the summer session of the Brimfield Antique Flea Market. Market opened for business yesterday, runs through Sunday. The Brimfield Flea Market is one of America's oldest outdoor flea markets, spreads across miles of fields, and people flock to it for antique hunting 3 times a year. It runs for a week each in May, July, and September. For directions and more information, you can go to brimfieldantiquefleamarket.com. 86 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
Houston Rowdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Wednesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library. And we are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
We're joined now at the library by Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell for July's edition of Ask the AG. If you have a question for her, you give her a call or a text at 877-301-8970. If you're at the library, you look for our colleague Zoe, who would be right there. That would be Zoe. And you say, I'd like to talk to the Attorney General. There's a fairly good chance you'll be able to. Attorney General, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
It's great to be here, especially with that beautiful baby over there.
Oh, my goodness. Newborn. Wow.
Good to be here.
Congratulations. going from a newborn, which is so hopeful and happy, to all our problems, which are not great and so hopeful and happy. But let's start with the thing that's dominating the news. President Biden, he's going to give a press conference tomorrow. A lot of people are hoping that he does well, fearing that he may not do well. Do you think, Attorney General, you're a Democrat, he should step aside?
I've repeatedly said that's a question for President Biden, and as long as he and, of course, Vice President Harris are in this race, I am fully supporting them. I think what I am focused on and stressing to the residents, but the average resident that maybe isn't paying attention, is just how critical and important this election is. It is the most important election of our lifetime, and I've been stressing to folks, because it has not been a part of the narrative, we need to focus on the issues. If you want access to reproductive health care, if you want access to IVF, if you want access to abortion health care because, for example, you are pregnant and in week 18 you got a diagnosis that the child you're carrying is going to die, and you don't want to carry that child to full term. You want that choice with your provider and with your partner or spouse. Biden and Harris are the only folks that are focused on that. If you want to deal with issues of economics and affordability, we're taking on junk fees, student loan debt. Biden, Harris, the only the only candidates that are focused on that. If you care about your children, and I'm a mom of 2 young boys, and protecting them in terms of gun violence, which is the #1 cause of death with our young people, everything having to do with their mental health, making sure they have clean drinking water, Biden and Harris are our folks.
But
it's
of course,
as simple as that.
But of course, other Democrats, including Kamala Harris, are in the same place on the issue. So I guess the question is, do you hope he decides that maybe he's not the most effective messenger for those issues, because he has gone from losing a little bit before the debate to losing considerably in some of these swing states after the debate. And Kamala Harris, in some polls at least, is doing better than Joe Biden is against Donald Trump.
I support both of them fully, and I know the vice president has been unequivocal in saying she is standing with our president. And at the end of the day, I think one thing I want to stress is running for public office, and in this moment in time, being the president of the United States takes tremendous sacrifice. And if you care about all the issues I just mentioned, and of course, protecting our democracy, our rule of law, ensuring there's no political violence in this country or another coup, where if that happens, the president, based on the recent Supreme Court decision, would get away with that and have absolute immunity. If you care about everything that we probably take for granted in this country and we want it to continue to be a democracy, Biden and Harris are your only choices in this election, and more importantly, that sacrifice that the president is making every single day on behalf of all of us. The question now becomes, what's the sacrifice you're going to make to protect this country? Are you going to get out and vote? Are you going to get out and phone bank? Are you going to get out and door knock? Are you going to get out and do your part to support this ticket, which is really important?
You know, I don't even know how to put this, because I have great respect for you. I refuse to believe that people watched the debate last Thursday. And by the way, I know I speak for Marjorie. We think this president has done remarkable things. Remarkable things. I don't know how someone can watch that debate last Thursday, and next morning you wake up and you hear Nancy Pelosi saying the issue is it a condition or an episode? That's actually not the question. Even if it's only an episode, what happens when another episode happens at a critical moment, or another episode? When that debate was over, 10:42, a week ago Thursday, you said to assume you're home, you said to yourself, that man can lead us for another 4.5 years?
What I said to myself, it was a difficult debate to watch, and it was painful. And the next day, I had to go on television and talk about this election. And what I stressed is he's going to have to step it up big time in order to rally people, most importantly, infuse enthusiasm in this election. And that was his and remains his choice. He's earned being president of the United States. He's earned being the nominee of this particular election. And my job is to say, that's your choice. He's going to talk to his folks in his inner circle, including his family, and pray about it. And I'm a praying woman. But at the end of the day, we cannot take our focus off what matters the most. There are 2 choices currently in this election, Biden, Harris, and Trump. You care about the issues I mentioned, your children, democracy, rule of law, reproductive health care, affordability, economics, the middle class doing better than before, the poor doing better than they did before. They're the only choice. And at the end of the day, the recent Supreme Court case that people often are also not paying attention, that gave the president absolute immunity in certain cases, including if you weaponize your Department of Justice against your people, that's okay because you did it in your professional responsibilities. If you start a coup and an insurrection in your country, that's okay because you did it as the President of the United States. Fundamentally upended this idea that no one is above the law and made Trump above the law. So the only choice in this election, it's crystal clear, Biden, Harris, and not Trump. And I'm going to do everything in my power to support the Democratic ticket. And again, I stress to folks who are listening, I stress to folks who are paying attention, it's not our job to question right now whether or not he's okay. He's okay, he's demonstrating that with the vice president. It's our job to question what's the sacrifice we personally want to make, and maybe professionally, to make sure that this country continues to be a democracy, continues to care about humanity, continues to ensure we don't get a coup and political violence in this country, continues to value the certification of elections. That's what I'm focused on, and people better wake up.
Okay, so one last question about national things, and then we'll come back to Massachusetts at 877-301-8970. In addition to the Supreme Court decisions around Donald Trump, you're addressing a class of, which I assume you do, let's say high school kids. And they say there were 4 criminal cases brought against the former president of the United States. He was found guilty in one. The sentencing was postponed because of a Supreme Court decision. The whole case may get thrown out. Nothing is happening in Georgia. He has a judge in the tank in Florida. Nothing is happening there. And the Washington case is may never be tried now because of the Supreme Court decision. Attorney General, why should I believe that there is a fair justice system that's going to treat me appropriately and fairly in this country? What do you say to that kid?
I say it's an appropriate question. And actually, I take it a step back. I asked, are they involved in some way with politics? Because what I frequently hear when I engage young people, and I share my story and why I do this job and how I care about young people in particular, and anyone who's ever felt left out and left behind in ensuring our governmental office and the AG's office is responsive to their needs, I ask, you need to get political. And what I mean by that is not just voting, paying attention to what happens in these government spaces, including the Supreme Court. Those justices didn't get there by accident. They went through a process and they were nominated by Trump with the expectation that they would politicize that court, and that's what they've done. And most recently in this election, which is one of the most horrific decisions I've seen come out of the Supreme Court, and of course there are many, including those way back in the day dealing with slavery and the enslavement of black people. But in this particular case, what they said is this president is above the law. Justice Sotomayor said it plainly. It used to be a fundamental principle that no one was above the law. That was literally the mandate of our Constitution and what I carry out as AG every day. And what that court did was say, but if you are the president, you are, and gave absolute immunity. And so I would stress to those young people, if you want to see a different result, vote, get involved. I would say even run for office, maybe become a justice yourself. Mobilize and get involved because you do have power. This idea that we don't have power, we do have significant personal power. And one exercise of that is our vote. And if you're not old enough to vote, you can phone bank in any state you want. You can door knock in any state you want to ensure that Trump does not become the next president of this country. And I've been stressing to folks, as you can imagine, I am talking about this election everywhere I go, that we're not making this stuff up. We have a record of evidence of what he accomplished when he was president. And very little, if anything at all, really went towards protecting our democracy, the affordability issues that people say they care about, access to affordable housing, access to healthcare. It was the opposite. It was to divide this country, to create hate and to promote it and perpetuate it, and to ensure that we don't become a democracy, but like he has said, so that he can become a dictator. So I would tell those young people with all that at stake, there's a way that they can get involved and there's a way they can show up in this moment in time so we're not continuing this trajectory that we see.
Last few minutes, another big-time Democrat, George Clooney, has urged the president to step aside. Deb in Halifax, you're first with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Welcome, Deb.
Hi, Marjorie and Jim.
Hi.
I was actually on your show last year talking about my resident-owned community, Halifax Estates. And I wanted to ask the Attorney General to talk a little bit about her office's role in consumer protection, particularly as it relates to manufactured home communities and the homeowners who live in them. I know there's a lot going on right now in Massachusetts, and the AG's office commission and the AG's office in general have been hearing a lot from homeowners who are being severely mistreated by out-of-state investment companies buying up parks, neglecting the infrastructure while raising the rents and pushing people out. There's a class action suit right now against an out-of-state company, and there's also a suit in court that the AG's office assisted with by filing an amicus brief to support the right to purchase for that community. There's also legislation.
Well, Deb, rather than
keep going.
Well,
go ahead, Deb.
Rather than you describing what the Attorney General's doing, maybe we should have her do it. Is that okay?
Well, my question is.
Oh, good.
Is what on the AG's agenda for 2024 and 2025 in these areas to assist mobile home communities?
Terrific. Thank you, Deb. We really appreciate it. Nice to talk to you again.
Absolutely. And so we have said we're going to focus on all things housing because we know affordability is the number one issue that people care about. And again, while I'm telling folks to get out and vote for Biden and Harris, who are partners in this work, including on housing. And we have done a whole host of things in this space, and Deb, I appreciate you summarizing some of that. But one is, of course, the enforcement of the MBTA communities law, which is critical, and we can't lose sight of that because it's a tool that can bring about more housing, particularly housing that's near transit. We're at the forefront of enforcing that law. The second is everything having to do with just access to housing, making sure that people are not discriminated against in that process and trying to find housing. And the last, and also I will just stress, not just access to housing, but also the conditions in which people live. We have a neighborhood renewal division in our office that goes into communities to take blighted property, vacant property, and turn it into beautiful housing that is affordable. We were just in Fitchburg highlighting that. And then lastly, manufactured housing. Continued actually a housing tour where I went to Taunton and met with residents there who live in manufactured housing to make it crystal clear to them that we have not forgotten in this housing conversation those that live in this housing that is significantly not only housed by elders and seniors, but is indeed affordable. And you have folks coming together and buying the property up themselves as residents, which is extremely powerful. That was the case where we went to visit. And so we updated our guidance recently on manufactured housing, including people's rights, and did a Q&A. So Deb, check out our website. If you're on social media, I would encourage folks to go on social media. That guidance hadn't been updated in, I think, over a decade. And so we did that recently to make sure that folks knew we care about folks living here. We did file an amicus brief in support of more resident home ownership so that private corporations are not taking over this type of housing. So it's critical, and we're going to continue to take it on because at the end of the day, housing is the number one issue. And lastly, I have to stress this. We also established a housing unit in the office, which is the first of its kind in the history of the office.
Deb, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970.
Attorney General, tell us what's going on with Uber and Lyft. You wrote a piece about this for the Globe.
Oh, Uber and Lyft. I am so excited. I first have to give credit to my team, not just the lawyers, the staff, the administrative assistants, the paralegals, you name it. This was a hard-fought agreement, and the team worked really hard and day and night in some instances to give drivers the benefits they deserved. And let's not forget, at the beginning, the companies were pushing this false choice that you had to have. If they wanted flexibility for drivers, they couldn't get basic benefits. And we pushed back on that, and because of our advocacy, they have both. They have flexibility, and they now have a minimum pay that's $32.50. They have access to health care, to an insurance program that's like workers' comp. They have access to paid leave, so if they get sick or someone in their family, they have access to these critical benefits that we all take for granted probably. They're protected against discrimination. If they are going through a process and they are removed for some reason from the app, they now have an appeal process related to that decision. And this affects thousands of drivers in Massachusetts, namely poor folks or folks from communities of color. So it is about those who feel left out or left behind. And lastly, I will just stress, that's a reason people should care because it not only affects thousands of residents in Massachusetts, but most importantly, this infrastructure is a critical part of our transit system, in our transportation system, especially as you see the T have its issues here and there. So we're proud. And it's historic in that this is the The floor, of course, they can always get more benefits, but the floor, and it's a significant one compared to what we're seeing in the country.
I think when you announced the decision, or maybe in the op-ed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you said, this is done, but I support the ballot question that would give these drivers the right to unionize. Did you attempt to have that in the deal with the rideshare companies and they resisted? Is that why that ballot question is still outstanding?
No, so the ballot question is a separate track, separate conversation, and it always was.
Well, why not include it in that conversation and then negate the need for a ballot question if you could cut a deal?
A couple of different reasons. So they're seeking a ballot initiative. Just at some point, Uber and Lyft were seeking a ballot initiative that would have, frankly, not given drivers much of anything, including far less than what we got them. Significantly less. And so that is a separate question that is working through that legal process to become law. It was not in the purview of our case against Uber and Lyft, which involved misclassification from independent contractors to employees. So we kept it in that lane. Okay. And also, not only to get them the benefits that they deserve, they're going to pay us $175 million. And the bulk of that will go back to drivers who were denied these benefits in the past. So it's an agreement that looks forward but also backwards at that harm. And then on the ballot question, the unionization effort, it was just timely that we set the floor, but if they, of course, earn the rights to bargain and to form a union, which I think that is something they should be entitled to, so people get out and vote on the ballot questions, that is an opportunity for them to go back to the table with the companies and, of course, ask for more, which I think employees should always do.
Jasper and Marlborough, you're on with the Attorney General. Welcome.
Hello. I wanted to ask a question in regards to state information and PSAs. I did want to congratulate on the recent anti-abortion PSAs, but I did want to ask. I can't hear. I only noticed in Spanish.
Can you hold 1 second? You can't hear anything?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's not your end. It's our end. Jasper.
She's very low.
Oh, can you turn up the? Marjorie's going to help you.
I hear you, but I can't hear her.
Oh. Jasper,
Does this help?
Jasper?
Start that again. Jasper, start again. Is that okay, Attorney General?
Better.
Good, we're good
Okay.
now. Start again, please.
All right.
Thank you.
So my question is about state information and PSAs. So I did want to congratulate on the recent anti-abortion PSA, but I only noticed it in English and Spanish. And I do notice that a lot of Portuguese speakers would benefit from that information, especially in my community. I am a Portuguese speaker. Okay. I often relay information to my community, but I can only spread information so quickly.
That's right. First of all, thank you, Jasper, I think it is, right?
Jasper, it is,
Jasper,
yeah.
Thank you for the call, and we worked with the Department of Health and the administration on that and can absolutely go back to them and encourage different languages, including Portuguese. We do our best through our Fair Labor Division and wage theft cases, including our strategic plan of including several different languages, so we can bring that back to them. And it's a critical campaign. It's everything having to do with these crisis pregnancy centers, and I'll put that in quotes, or these anti-abortion centers giving misinformation to folks that they can, but really in reality, they cannot get access to reproductive health care, abortion care at these facilities. So we'll bring that back for sure. Thank you for calling in.
Jasper, thanks. We've spoken, I know you've talked about this ad nauseum, but obviously the issue is still outstanding. Stewart Healthcare. We asked you a couple of months ago if possible criminal charges were on the horizon for the Ralph De La Torres of the world, and your quote was, "Everything is on the table," and you're nodding in agreement for those who are not watching on the streaming. Since we saw you, Malta has indicted Ralph De La Torre and another executive. One of the bases for the indictment, the criminal indictment, is the diversion of money to consulting fees. And here in Massachusetts, we had a lot of diversion of money to Ralph De La Torre's personal needs or desires. At the same time, the Globe reported that a device, an embolism coil, had been repossessed, which would have saved the life of a woman, Ms. Rashid. Instead, she is dead. We have learned that they're surveilling, spending as much as $440,000 a month, thanks to great Globe reporting, surveilling. Are you still looking at the possibility of criminal charges against any of the individuals in the leadership of Stewart?
Everything is on the table. And I will continue to say that because I can't actually say any more than that, other than all of this information we're fully aware of, what's public, and then there's information, of course, available to us because, for example, we're part of the bankruptcy proceeding. We've inserted ourselves, and we will hold Stewart accountable. Well, there's a process that we have to go through. In any investigation, anything the office does, and we'll work on it with a sense of urgency, that's for sure. And when we can share more about the conclusion of that, we will show up publicly in a space like this and other spaces to make sure people know about that full analysis when appropriate. Right now, in addition to that analysis, which is fully within our wheelhouse at the AG's office, the other piece that is critically important, I don't want to sugarcoat this, and I have not been since the very beginning, I'm absolutely concerned about the state of affairs of the current facilities and access to health care or lack thereof, the possible shuttering of hospitals in certain communities. And so we're working with the governor and the administration to be as creative as we can, even though that's really their lane, to ensure continuation of access to health care, providers also getting the wages they deserve. And I will stress to folks in this moment in time, because I know at some facilities the numbers are declining in terms of folks going to these facilities for care. If you actually want to continue to get care from some of these facilities, use your feet, use your sort of voting, meaning by showing up at these facilities to say these facilities matter to our community. Because the administration looks at those numbers too. Who's using them, when, for what purposes, as they fight creatively to work with the legislature to make sure we have access to care.
By the way, is the legislature going to finish its work on private equity oversight?
I hope so. I know
they're leaving in 3 weeks.
I hope so. I think that's at the top of the list for us. I know it's been a priority for them, along with other pieces of legislation.
You know, one thing, you are both lawyers and I'm not, so I don't understand why, like right out of the box, if you were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, as Jim said, to spy on some guy and his kid as he's walking her to school and putting a track so they can follow people in their house, and you're granting people such exorbitant salaries as a for-profit that this dilatory character can be buying these $90 million yachts or whatever they cost, at the same time as the embolism coil, that medical equipment that could have stopped the bleed in the liver of the 39-year-old woman, Secunda Rashid, who died after giving birth at St. Elizabeth's. I don't understand why that just right away isn't a criminal act. Is it because they haven't regulated for-profit hospitals? I just don't get why we even need that extra step. It seems so obvious to me that's a criminal thing to do.
Well, we have a legal system and we have a process where everyone's afforded a certain level of rights in that process, whether it's a criminal investigation, a civil investigation. I just talked about Uber and Lyft. If they get deactivated by the company, and the company says this person was doing something horrific, they still should have a process, just like our legal process affords everyone that. The same is true here. That being said, I want the public to know we're not only focused on that access to care issue and inserted ourselves in the bankruptcy proceedings, et cetera, and we're the only state robustly showing up because they have facilities in other states. That accountability question of holding them accountable, that is top of the list in the office. The team is working every single day on that. When we can share after a full investigation and gathering of information, and we know that's not easy with Stewart to get information, we're doing that. We will come back and share on that accountability question. But the last piece that's important that Jim stressed, that legislative fix, the private equity, that's equally important because there are some transactions that if the AG's office had some power in real time, in the moment, could have reviewed certain transactions, including MPT and this lease question and the rent question. There are certain transactions the office could have reviewed but didn't have the power to do at the time that could have attached conditions, stopped the transaction from happening. So that legislative piece is just as important. So we're working all angles to protect our people. And I obviously inherited this, so I had to get up to speed on years of information, and some of it very painful, as are reported on by the Globe and other public outlets, about where they were directing resources to when it should have been directed to patients, when it should have been directed to providers. And so we are mindful of that, and we're working really hard.
877-301-8970 is the number. Where do you want to go?
Jacob in Brighton, you're on with the Attorney General. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Jacob.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Sure.
Attorney General Campbell, when we went to renew, so I'm an apartment renter. When we went to renew our lease, one of our roommates left and a new one came in. The company which handles the property management for our landlord charged us a $500 leasing fee for adding the new person on. So I was under the impression that besides rent, landlords could legally charge for rent, first month, last month, security deposit, and a lock change. But the property management company said, oh, anytime a new person is added to the lease, this fee applies. It's separate. It's not part of any deposit. So since they're property managers and not landlords, I mean, I'm just confused why they feel entitled to charge us for the $500 for changing out a name. I mean, I can't imagine any services were rendered. Credit checks are much less expensive than that. And our decision was either to pay up or not pay and risk having them pull the lease offer from under us. So, I mean, what can we do about this? At this point, we paid the fee, but we're out $500, and that's a lot of money.
Great question,
so,
Jacob.
Jacob, first of all, God bless you. Thank you for calling, because we get a lot of questions into the office by renters where they're being charged a fee that is unwarranted. So because your case is so specific and we want more information about the management company, et cetera, if you could stay on, Kira and Julia from ISC, which is our front line, they're on the phones all the time taking constituent complaints.
What does that mean?
Stay on.
What is ISC?
What is ISC?
What? Thank you very much.
I only did that so they
give her an opportunity.
Exactly, so they could be highlighted in their own voice. Our team is the best.
So you actually knew what it stood for?
Of course.
I was kidding.
And normally you see Lauren, but yes. So Kira's here. So if you could stay on, and we can get your details, we'll follow up and get on this ASAP.
Jacob, do not go away. We'll get
She's
your
also
contact
here with
info.
Julia, who's one of our co-ops.
Do you want to introduce anybody else or no?
Yes, here's Sydney and Molly.
Okay.
From comms.
This is a general question about renting, just because I've seen a lot of apartments. I can't believe what they're charging people to rent these places. It's the city or town, I presume, Attorney General. If you have like wood rotting or stairs falling apart or whatever, that's the city or the town that you have to go to complain about that landlord, or what do people do in those situations?
It can vary. So, it could be your local public health, for example, if it's a sanitary code violation or something else. Some people obviously try to work directly with their landlord or the management company and say, hey, wait a minute, you can't charge this. Or it could be our office. We get a lot of calls into ISC or CARD, which is another consumer protection division in our office, that they take calls, emails, or a hotline. And so we we work to be responsive and to direct them to the appropriate space.
Okay.
So it depends sometimes.
Paul and Braintree, you're on with
we got to take a break.
We have to take a break.
Paul,
I
don't
forgot.
go anywhere.
I was supposed to take a break, and I forgot.
We promise you're next, Paul. Don't go away.
Okay. You are listening. I'm
Somebody's
here.
listening.
You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General, who's also listening, is here
and talking. It's incredible at the same time.
Yep, she's here at the top of the hour. If you want to call 877-301-8970.
America's closest allies meet in Washington as Ukraine's fate hangs in the balance and elections all over test the political will of Western democracies. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Join us for the latest from the NATO summit and the day's top global news. That's all next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com. And ISS National. Researchers and developers can learn how to take their research to space at the International Space Station Research and Development Conference in Boston, July 29th to August 1st. Registration at issconference.org. And New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill, a garden destination 50 miles from Boston. Visitors can discover summer with thousands of blooms, twilight experiences, art exhibitions, and educational programs for all ages. NEBG.org. And Beacon Circle patrons Tanya Phillips and Jeffrey Dover, proud to support GBH 89.7 and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we are joined for this whole first hour by Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell, answering your questions and ours at 877-301-8970. And I repeat, if you want to ask a question directly to the Attorney General, like in person, you just go to Zoe over there and see what we can do. Can I ask you a question?
No, because you're supposed to go to Paul.
Oh, Paul, you're right.
Paul
Thank
and
you.
Thank
Good,
you,
somebody's
Attorney General.
paying attention.
Yeah.
Paul and Braintree. Wow.
Hey, Jim.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Jim. Marjorie.
Hi.
Wow, was
I
I
don't mind
smacked
waiting.
down? Go ahead, Paul. I'm kidding.
I'm watching on YouTube.
Great.
I have a
Hi,
quick
Paul.
question.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
There's a bit of an echo, but I'll just continue.
Please.
I have a neighbor who's filing a wrongful termination case, and in the process, she went to MCAD, Mass Commission Against Discrimination, because age discrimination was part of it. She turned 70, and this health provider let her go at that age. She was told that the window of opportunity to file an age discrimination case is only 300 days.
Yeah.
That had passed. But there's 3 years to file a wrongful termination suit. Why the discrepancy? They're two sides of the same coin. It doesn't make any sense to me or to her.
Paul, thanks.
Paul, first of all, thank you for the question. And it may be something to look into. I do know the MCAD we work closely with them because we get mandatory referrals from the MCAD in the context of employment and also in the context of housing. And when I was working with Governor Deval Patrick, that was one of my agencies. And I will just stress, it's a critical agency because it's the first place you can go to address any discrimination. And you're not charged something, right? This is the direct access for people to address it. And so sometimes when determining what a statutory deadline should be, it's about a fairness question to those who might be on the other side. It's about process. It's a whole bunch of things. So that being said, I think it's something we can look into. Sorry to hear that. We've heard folks get really frustrated when they go and they miss the deadline because they didn't know. But if I will say, if she's not getting somewhere in other channels, feel free to still reach out to the office because I don't know the details of her case. People call about a lot of different things, and who knows, it may be something that's relevant. So, Paul, if she wants to follow up with us, she can and she should.
Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your call.
Just to stress on that, I mean,
please.
It always varies and depends. I think as a legislature right now is looking at where we extend statutes of limitations and deadlines on certain types of cases, whether it's child abuse or violence, family violence, whatever it is. It's always an ongoing conversation, so I appreciate Paul's work. And I will just say, for anyone who's involved with the MCAD, it's an agency that still needs a lot of work, more human capital, more resources. The folks work hard, but it really does need more significant investment, and that's something we're working with the administration on.
Attorney General, yesterday we had a brief discussion with the mayor about the demotion of former Deputy Superintendent Eddie Crispin, who was told by Commissioner Cox he had to choose between a position on Commissioner Cox's command staff or stay on the Post Commission, the statewide entity created during criminal justice reform in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and things like that. You appointed Crispin to Post. He chose to stay there. That is former Deputy Superintendent Crispin, and as a result, demoted, $40,000 pay cut. Here's what Mayor Wu said yesterday when we asked her how she felt about the Commissioner Cox's decision.
I fully back his judgment. We've achieved great results, and the commissioner is doing an amazing job leading this department. He needs to have every ability to shape the team around him.
You know, and Adrian Walker wrote a great column, and I want to quote from what Adrian wrote. He says, "This isn't about Cox's right to pick his team, which no one is really disputing. It's about how it can possibly be that supporting better training and accountability, meaning through the Post Commission, conflicts with serving on that team. That's the question that Cox and Wu can't or won't answer." You praised the appointment of, and you made it, of former Deputy Superintendent Crispin. What's your position on this demotion, the decision by Cox and its support by Wu?
One, I want to stress that I think at moments that's been lost. Post is a significant commission. As you just said, it came out of the criminal legal reform conversations at the State House post George Floyd. So folks, you now have an entity not only pushing for greater transparency and training in departments to be equal and the same across the state, because that is not the case now, but also accountability. So where an officer does something wrong, you can go to Post to have them decertified as an officer in law enforcement. That's a critical tool. They play a critical role. I have several appointees to Post, and one of those appointees has to come from a list from MAMLEO, which represents minority officers. I've known them for years, since my work as a city councilor in Boston.
Which Crispin did come from, yeah.
Exactly. So there were 3 folks submitted. We did our thorough background, and all have worked hard. All of those nominees have continued to work hard. Eddie's application was outstanding. I've known him because of my work on the city council and the work he did in community. But the number of letters of support and recommendations, it was incredible, including support from folks who serve within BPD who also supported him joining Post. That was also part of the process. He is serving, and unfortunately, we get the news that he is going to have to choose between his Post appointment and serving on command staff. And we stress that he should be allowed to do both. That it's not a violation of the statute and it's not a violation of the conflict of interest law, because we took that into consideration. If anything, it actually encourages the Post statute and everything, and policy and practice encourage folks to be active law enforcement and also to serve in some meaningful role, to serve on Post, because there's a perspective they bring. And I was confident, as was my team, that he would not have violated any secrets, of course, of Commissioner Cox or anyone else in serving in that role, or he serves in Mamley and other entities. And so that's a decision, obviously, for Commissioner Cox and the mayor in terms of whether or not he keeps both or not. I've made my position clear. And
to them? Have you made it clear to them?
I've made it clear to the city of Boston, and as has my team. And not to discount Commissioner Cox and the role he plays. I have a great relationship with him. We do great work. But on this particular question, the question is, what's the rationale? And first, it was a conflict of interest. That's not the case. A conflict of a statute. That's not the case, or something else. And so you got to be crystal clear on the rationale and reasoning, which I think is really important here in terms of when you shift somebody. Because people, of course, are looking, but most importantly, if we talk about equity, we talk about fairness, there needs to be a legitimate reason as to why.
And you haven't heard such a reason yet?
No.
Attorney General Beth Milton has text. She says, I want to ask the Attorney General about businesses accepting cash. You mentioned before on this show that it was state law to accept cash, but according to Beth anyway, she says state parks don't accept cash, and now the T won't either, neither of which I was aware of, but that's what she claims.
I'm not sure what she's referring to. So yes, we are, anytime there is some agency that looks to not receive cash, we are on top of that. And we have some ongoing matters right now where we're looking at certain entities and facilities where they are requiring folks to be cashless when they enter,
yes.
And the inequities around that. Even if they look to do it in a fair way where there's machines and they're close by, is it accessible to someone who may have a disability? Is it accessible to young people who may not have a credit card or something else, or whatever it is? And so we are on top of that. But if Beth has specific questions, I would say she should stay on.
She's a texter. Text us again, Beth, with your contact info.
Beth. Thank you.
And we'll get back to you. Let's go to William.
Oh, we have some from Jamie, our producer, says the MBTA announced Tuesday their contactless payment option on buses at subway stations and on the Green Line and Mattapan Line trials will roll out on August 1st.
So, I mean, I would say for the Charlie card issue, that's been ongoing because they would say there are machines at different places. We can look into that, but I think it's a question for the administration. They're obviously looking to be as accessible as they can to make it easier for folks to get on all transits, but we can look into it.
William in Boston, you're on with the Attorney General. Thank you for calling. Hi.
Good morning, Attorney General. I have a question on Senate Bill 887. It's called the Anti-Bullying Act, and what it does is it helps elderly residents if they're being bullied by other tenants, and it also helps them if they're being bullied by management. Bullying is a stupid word. It should be harassment. And it's been, lying dead in the Senate for God knows how long. I want to know if you support it, and if you do not, why not?
Thank you for the question. I have to look into it. We have gone up to the State House to actually support a lot of pieces of legislation as they relate to elders. We also even established an elder justice unit in our office. So even if legislation that we think is significant doesn't pass the State House, we still have tools in our office to help elders when it comes to scams and consumer protection issues, harassment, bullying, discrimination, you name it. So I would suggest, what was the name of it?
William in Boston.
So William, I would suggest if folks are experiencing something specific, reach out to us. On this particular legislation, I have to get into the weeds because I'm not sure the status, and there are a lot of bills at the State House.
William, thank you
for the concept,
for the call.
Anyone who is experiencing harassment and discrimination can reach out to our office.
Can I ask one? I was thinking about what you just said about you haven't heard a compelling reason again for the demotion very quickly of former Deputy Superintendent Eddie Crispin. And you obviously voiced your respect for Commissioner Cox. Do you have a hypothesis about what else is going on?
I have no idea. I've been telling folks that's the question for the mayor and the commissioner. It's their decision whether or not they want him to serve on command staff and the post. I only, of course, as he is appointing authority, we followed the process, we followed the law, of course, and he has the right, based on the law at least, to serve on both. So that's on them. And of course, they have discretion. So I'm not in their shoes or position.
Attorney General, lots of people know that you and other AGs around the country, many people have worked very hard to get this settlement that would have given Massachusetts as much as $110 million to fund prevention, treatment, and recovery programs surviving the opioid epidemic. The Supreme Court last month rejected that deal. I know you were quoted in the Globe as saying you were going to continue efforts to get that funding, but what is your reaction to the decision, and how, I mean, $110 million is a lot of money. How can that be replaced?
Well, I know there are many folks who are absolutely disappointed with that result because they were expecting resources to come in to help with treatment, recovery, and everything we would need to take on the opioid crisis, which is still significant in Massachusetts and, of course, in this country. And I feel bad also for those folks who are seeking some closure, but also accountability from Purdue and the Sackler family that don't have that. It's been reopened. But they can feel confident that my team, and we have already rolled up our sleeves to figure out what comes next. And there are different moving pieces and parts where we go from here to work with other states, because it's not just Massachusetts, of course, and other stakeholders, to ensure those families get the accountability they deserve. And that our states, Massachusetts being one of them, but many other states also get the resources we need to continue to address this crisis. So it is now ongoing, where it's back to us, and there are a lot of procedural issues, but I will come back to folks publicly when some things have actually worked out. So it's going back to the bankruptcy process, and now we have to insert ourselves there.
And by the way, we should just say the flip side of this for people concerned about it, it allowed the Sackler family to insulate billions of dollars of their own money, even if insulate them from future litigation. So the plus was what you were describing, a lot of money for people and institutions and governments who need it. But the flip side is that the Sacklers, some would say, got away with murder, literally and figuratively.
So I know there are different perspectives on this. The settlement, everything was the leadership of my previous AG, my current governor, Healy, and I have to give her credit. We were the first state to even sue them.
In their personal capacity, the first in America. In personal capacity,
the first in America. And so this AG's office has been stepping up, and I have to give the governor credit. She has led this work. And I do know there were different perspectives on the settlement. Some were excited to get money quickly and get resources to communities and residents on recovery as quickly as we can. Others said, no, we need to push the envelope. So Supreme Court made their decision, and now we're stuck with that.
Was it the wrong? You think it was the wrong decision?
In this particular instance, I would have liked to see that money come into our state, because we know people need it right now, not just for treatment and recovery, for employment opportunities, for housing. The list is long in terms of the municipalities that are calling our office because of our opioids work and calling the fund to say we need resources to be able to take this on, and significant resources. People are dying every day from substance use disorder. And so it is disappointing on the one hand. On the other hand, I understand the other perspective. I don't want to discount that, because these are all families that have lost something, including family members who have died because of the Sackler family in Purdue. So now we just have to go back to the drawing board and push as aggressively for more funding, for more accountability, and we're up for that challenge.
Mayot from Chestnut Hill, I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's Tim Mayot, good friend of Emily Rooney.
Oh, good, Tim. Thank you.
What's up?
Hi, how are you?
We are too. We're good friends too. So just so you understand where we all are. Go ahead. Whatever. Sorry. Shouldn't have brought that up. Go ahead.
I found out that my medications, a couple of my medications, are actually cheaper if you buy them out because paying copay.
Oh, we can't.
Hey, Tim, can I say something to you? The connection's horrible. You should just ask your question, because we're going to lose you otherwise, and we'll do the best we can.
Yeah,
what is your question for the Attorney General?
So the question is there any way that, is this an ongoing problem that you've heard about? And is there any way I can get money
So
going backwards?
maybe Tim should stay on. because he's breaking up.
Yeah, Tim, the Attorney General, I don't know if you heard that, asked you to stay on, and she'll have one of her staff people talk to you.
We can't hear you, Tim.
Because we're not getting the full story.
So at least if we get your number,
Yeah.
Tim, we can follow up.
Stay on, give your contact information, and the Attorney General's office will follow up, as
And
they
just
said.
to make it clear, we do follow up, and I get the readout of everyone we say to stay on. We follow up. I get the notes. We refer where appropriate if we're not the appropriate space to solve the complaint. So Tim, stay on and share your number, and we will follow up.
You know, while Marjorie's looking at something there, you are involved now, I believe, in some investigation into this the situation with Sandra Birchmore, who originally was declared to have, I believe, by the medical examiner, to have committed suicide. And there's been a very prominent pathologist hired who says, in fact, it's homicide. And my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is you've taken over a piece of this from the local DA, from Morrissey's office. Can you tell us what your involvement is and what the status of this is?
Ongoing. And, you know, of course, I wish I could tell folks and be more forthcoming, but in certain ongoing investigations, we cannot be.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I want to be crystal clear. This is a horrific case. And if you followed any of the coverage related to this, I would say beautiful young lady, it's horrific. And it provides another reason why people should care about posts.
By some police officers, right?
I will just say it's ongoing, but I would say if you follow at least what's been public, someone died. At the end of the day, someone died. Let's not forget that. But also, it also lifts up the importance of post in this context, because Post also plays a role here. I can't speak publicly on my role, but Post has, as they're undergoing whether or not these officers that are alleged to have been involved should be decertified. That's ongoing with Post. But again, this commission is critical to accountability, because they can say you can't be in law enforcement anymore if there's misconduct, whereas before them, you could go to another job, maybe in another state, and do whatever you wanted, even if you were found guilty of wrongdoing. So this is ongoing for us. But again, I think an opportunity to lift up the important work of Post.
John in the car, thank you for calling.
Hello, John.
Hi. I was just wondering, my mother, she gashed her leg a couple weeks ago, brought it to UMass Memorial, got there at 6 at night, finally left at 6 in the morning.
Wow.
The entire waiting room was overrun with illegal immigrants. And they were all being processed. They all had green wristbands on. So they went through security. And then many had a lot of friends in the healthcare profession. And it's not just UMass Memorial, it's Mass General. It's affecting the treatment. I mean, it's ridiculous. And they're just it's like a processing thing. Will anything be done the way it was done with the airport? You know?
So, is it John?
John, it's John.
Well, first of
yeah.
all, sorry to
John
hear
in the
about
car.
your mom, and I hope she's okay. I'm not aware of, who was in the emergency room at that time, or even what their status was. So I want to be careful, even when I characterize all immigrants as illegal, which I would never, because some may be there under some asylum status or something else. I want to be clear. But that being said, to your question, we're working with the administration every day and community-based stakeholders who care deeply about this issue, about the influx of migrants coming to Massachusetts. Our lane is making sure folks know what their rights are, just like those who came before them knew what their rights were. And so we are doing our part. I know the governor just made a decision that the airports are going to be cleared out and that emergency housing will be provided to folks. So that is underway and happening to get folks what they deserve. I will just have to stress, I live in Mattapan in Boston. Mattapan, if you know anything about the history of Boston, the demographics shifted frequently. You had Jewish families, you had Irish families, you had Italian families in the North End. Boston, robust migrant culture and history. Folks who came here undocumented with no status whatsoever, who were afforded benefits and privileges. And so as we have folks coming here from very desperate situations in other countries, we have to afford them some level of humanity. And not to suggest, John, you are not, so I want to be crystal clear. But I've been saying that to my team, we have to do our part in this moment in time. And one other thing I do want to also stress is it's not just about the humanity piece. And for some, the humanity and moral piece, they don't care. It's also about the workforce challenges that we have here in Massachusetts. You think about the number of jobs that are filled by immigrants, and those who would describe themselves as immigrants our healthcare system in many ways would crumble. And that was articulated and evidenced by COVID. The folks who are doing the laundry, providing the food, the nurses, the elder care space. If you look at the number of Haitians who are participating in that workforce, if you don't have them coming for these jobs and doing what they can for their families and their kids, we are in trouble. And so I also stress the economics, the cultural, the humanity piece. It is significant, and I don't think that often is in the narrative, but it's just as important to our economy as well.
John, thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Do you think the Supreme Court was right when it's ruled that you can arrest people and find people who are sleeping in so-called homeless encampments? That was one of their other recent decisions.
We have a minute.
We were on the other side of that. We filed an amicus working with another AG, and I will say we're continuing working with AGs for the Supreme Court to get it right. When it comes to us addressing those who are dealing with homelessness, we want to provide resources, housing. They don't need to be criminalized, especially if they have no place to go. And I think, again, another reason for folks to pay attention to what the court is doing. But the Supreme Court happens because of the president you pick. And so if you want a different Supreme Court, you want a different result, you better get out and vote for Biden and Harris. As simple as that.
On that note, good to see you, Attorney General.
Great
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Campbell, for joining us.
Thank
we really
you.
appreciate your time. We've been speaking, of course, with Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and she comes and visits us every month. She comes and visits.
Listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And National Grid, helping businesses work toward a sustainable future by offering guidance on heat pump solutions. Learn more about how heat pumps can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions at ngrid.com/future. Explore the incredible story of the African-American Olympians who defied Jim Crow and Adolf Hitler to win.
To mobilize millions of union households to vote for Biden come November. This meeting comes as the president is working to shore up support from key parts of the Democratic base. In the next several days, he will also be speaking at the NAACP National Convention and the Unidos U.S. Annual Conference. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Opening statements are underway in actor Alec Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Special Prosecutor Erlinda Ocampo Johnson tells jurors movie set safety rules require actors like the defendant to treat every firearm as if it is loaded, to never point it at another person.
Jane Wynn of the Berkshire Environmental Action Team, including 10 shopping carts.
We would haul the cart all the way up the steep riverbank and then have to raise it 6 feet to throw it over the fence to get it out of the river.
They also pulled out many nip bottles, along with cell phones, hypodermic needles, and a drawer from a cash register. Wynn says cleanups over the past 20 years have made a huge difference for brook trout, great blue heron, turtles, beaver, and muskrat. And she says kids on the river on Pittsfield's west side are catching crayfish again. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Nancy Cohen.
Jared Ravizza, the man accused of stabbing 6 people in Braintree and killing his roommate in Connecticut, has been found to be mentally competent. Spent 6 weeks at Bridgewater State Hospital, underwent a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. He's now being held without bail at Norfolk County Correctional Center. Ravizza's attorney says hospital staff diagnosed him with substance-induced psychosis. It's 88 degrees in Boston. We're looking at a high.
That Joe Biden should step aside. Actually, there's an op-ed in the New York Times, which I missed this morning. But if we could see it, it'd be great, colleagues here. In any case, joined now at the interview desk by GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's also host of The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 p.m. And he is a world traveler just back from Japan. Hello, Jared Bowen.
Hello.
So, Jared Bowen, I want to start with a couple of news stories before we talk about these islands in Japan that are just filled with art. Theater tax credits. It's getting to Beacon Hill. How big of a deal are we know about the movie tax credits? We've talked about those many times. This is theater tax credits. What does this mean? Is it a good idea?
Well, this is a really big deal because I think that, and this is not casting any aspersions on the film tax credit, but this is so locally based. And of course, the film tax credit does employ local crews. And actually, it is similar now that I'm thinking about it because to a degree you have outside entities. But basically what the live theater tax credit would do would be incentivizing people who are creating shows that are bound for Broadway or for national tours to come here. There is an addition to this, which you wouldn't necessarily see with the film tax credit, which is it's also geared toward local theater companies. But literally, right before here, I was at the Emerson Colonial Theater because the Queen of Versailles is about to open there. So they arrived in town last week, so that's 2 weeks of employing people in the theater already. Sometimes you see shows just have a 3-week run, so they're sitting down for 2 weeks just to get the show up. Then it opens next week, and then it plays all the way through August, and then likely goes to Broadway.
This is the thing I saw on TV with this...
Kristen Chenoweth. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's huge. Did you meet with her today?
I did, yeah.
Well, we don't care about the tax credit. What's with her? What do you think of her?
She's incredible. I've interviewed her before. She loves theater so much. She loves performance. It's so in her. You can see it. She just oozes it. She's incredible. But the point is that you have a show like this that sits down at the Colonial Theater. People come in, they eat at restaurants, they park, all the things that we've talked about. Maybe they make a day of it. They come into the city and they shop. Well, this incentivizes this to happen by giving this tax credit, because right now we're seeing productions go to other places like Rhode Island, New York to some degree, Louisiana. So this can change the game. Louisiana is a big game for launching these kinds of things. The other thing this tax credit does, though, where it brings it home, is it's geared toward anybody with a production budget of $100,000, or I think at this point, because it's with the Senate right now, it's about 150 seats, which means local theater companies can also avail themselves of this tax credit, and it doesn't necessarily have to be bound for Broadway or a national tour, so it's also propping up the theater industry, and there's equity here because, as I understand it in this latest version, and it's changing hour by hour, that you can only apply for one a year, so there's kind of equal distribution with a $5 million cap.
By the way, we should say Kristen Chenoweth and her company came here without a tax credit. And I just looked up Louisiana. I'm sure they have this tax credit. Their minimum wage is $7.25, which I'm sure helps when you want to have incredibly cheap
but the Queen
labor. But, you know, there's a whole question. And by the way, I don't know enough because I'm a huge supporter, not as much as you, but I like to think I'm a big supporter of local theater. I love it and go as often as I can, as you know. The issue with the film tax credit, where there continues to be a debate, is when you target a specific industry, are you rewarding behavior that for the most part would happen otherwise? Are you encouraging behavior that wouldn't happen, in which case it's a net win for the state? And the only thing that makes me nervous, I don't know how long they've been considering in the State House. Again, I know I'm a broken record, 3 weeks to go till they go home. I hope that this is, if they decide to do it, it's on the merits, that they're convinced that this is a financial benefit, economic benefit for Massachusetts, not just a sort of a kiss for the theater industry that won't produce the desired results.
No, and it's true that the Queen of Versailles has come here without the tax credit, but I think we would see more. We don't see more. It's been a while since we've seen a professional pre-Broadway, announced Broadway production like that come here. This is also something that was in the governor's economic development bill. The House got its support behind it too, because I think there's a new way of thinking about the arts and culture sector. As I often talk about, it's an economic engine, and for an industry that has just been completely battered, they're still trying to bring back in audiences. This is a way to help. Yes, you can argue it favors one industry over another, which it certainly does, but I think this is also the way of the world.
Yeah. And it's really neat on the film tax credit thing to see these movies, the American fiction, so all the scenes from Massachusetts was pretty neat. The house we talked to you about, was it Rosendale or West Roxbury? That
it was
great
West
house
Roxbury, yeah.
Yeah, a spectacular house that you could all drive by and see in real life. It was pretty neat. But by the way, the Queen of Versailles, I did see that on TV. It was a thing with this elaborate Versailles-like mega mansion, I think in Florida or something?
It's in Orlando, Florida, and it was the timeshare king who was going to build the most expensive and largest house in America.
Yeah.
In the course of that it was a documentary, and over the course of the documentary, you see his fortunes just fall away because of the 2008 financial collapse.
Okay, so the New York Times had a great piece talking about women superstars, pop stars, including Taylor Swift, singing about their difficulties with eating disorders, that they feel like they're going to be so skinny all the time. So we're going to play a little sound first to get us in the mood. Here's Charlie's XCX's Girl So Confusing, featuring Lorde, Taylor Swift's You're On Your Own Kid, and Billie Eilish's Skinny.
For the last couple years, I've been at war in my body. I tried to starve myself
Billie Eilish is 22 years old.
Yeah.
She's really incredible.
Isn't her work amazing?
Incredible.
Amazing. But tell us, I mean, this is a lot of people suffer from eating disorders, a lot, particularly men too, but I think it's probably more women. But this is, I think, kind of a good thing.
Well,
that they're talking about
I don't,
it.
because
You don't?
why? Well, it's a good thing they're talking about it, but what I mean is it doesn't change.
Right.
This has been the case with popular culture forever. You see the early Hollywood stars. You learn that they, back in the black and white days, that they felt that they had to starve themselves.
Yep.
You move forward, Elton John talked about having bulimia in his days. And you see a large number of male stars coming out now talking about this as well. I think there was a lot of shame if you were a man and you had any sort of eating disorder, but now people are feeling more open about it. And now we have Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Lizzo, Demi Lovato, Kesha. It goes on and on and on. Florence Welch and Olivia Rodrigo saying that she stopped eating cake on her birthday because there is still this notion, it has never really waned, that you have to look a certain way to be successful, or, especially in this age of social media, you know that if you don't look the part that the American public wants you to be in terms of being thin and beautiful, you're going to go online and see the most horrific things written about yourself. So it's not changing. And
but you
because of
didn't
social
mean
media,
that you don't
can't
think it's
police
good
it.
that they're singing about it, I assume.
No.
You meant that the problem still exists. But when
Exactly.
people of that stature have the courage to talk about these kinds of things, at least it raises
No,
the possibility
definitely, yeah.
that people will have the courage to talk about it more broadly, right?
I hope so, but this is, I absolutely mean it's a good thing that they're talking about it. I'm so sad that it doesn't change, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this again in another generation.
Well, you think of some of the great singer-songwriters before we had social media, before everybody was doing videos, you could just listen to their music. I mean, Bonnie Raitt is a great musician. She's not she's a good-looking woman, but she's not some kind of knockout person. You wonder whether
I think she is, actually, but it's irrelevant, but I think she is.
You wonder whether some people like that could even, or certainly Janis Joplin back in our day, could make it as stars today because they don't fit that mold. I think that's a lot of the pressure that these women are feeling, that they have to get up there and physically be visible, and I think that's made it worse.
I mean, what I'm about to say isn't entirely true, but I also think it's a certain pathway that people are trying to find. If you want to go the really commercial route and you need to have the backing of the studio or the label and you need to court that press, unlike, I think I have this right, people like Bonnie Raitt kind of came up more organically through the folk circuit.
Yes.
And like Joan Baez, you weren't necessarily looking for that, and you didn't need to have people breathing down your neck telling you that you had to lose weight, which so many of these stars are told. And we're talking about major stars too, huge celebrities. They have contracts that demand a certain appearance. They have to be careful with their language because you can't get away with that, but they have ways of expressing and exerting their power. And this is exactly what is still happening, and now it's amplified through social media.
Can we go to a good news story?
Yeah, please.
Japan.
Yeah.
How wildly great was your time? How long were you there, by the way?
I was there for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're going to travel that far, you want to make the most of it.
And?
First of all, the culture is just absolutely incredible. I'll try to steer away from the travel stuff so that Chris Muther can talk about it. So I was in Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka, and Naoshima.
Wow.
So the really huge part for me was visiting Naoshima and Toshima, which are these two art islands. And it was so invigorating to learn about this. I hadn't known about them at all.
I didn't know about them until this second. What do you mean? What's an art island?
So basically, there is a Japanese billionaire who, more than 20 years ago, started buying up land on Naoshima and Toshima because they were sites of toxic dumps and things of that nature. But he saw opportunity here, and again, go back to the arts as an economic engine, and he started to commission this infrastructure that could be built on these islands so that you have these major art experiences. And the first one happens as you're arriving at Naoshima because you're on a ferry. It's about a 20-minute ferry ride from the mainland, and you see one of Kusama's giant pumpkins just adjacent to the ferry terminal. So right away, your first introduction to the island is this great public art, and then there are other sculptures. You go across the island, and there's another one of her sculptures, a yellow pumpkin, polka dot pumpkin, that's sitting out at the end of a pier. So you're looking at this vast landscape, and then one of her pumpkins is just so bizarre and wonderful and invigorating. And what they have really done is built these museums that draw people so that when you're traveling around this island, island by walking or by bicycle, or they have some buses that take you around. Everybody you're seeing is there because they love art, because that's basically all there is to do there. And I will tell you, I saw one of the most amazing installations at Tsushima, which is the adjacent art island. You take a ferry to get there, and there's this huge structure. And you walk in, it's the Tsushima Museum. First of all, they have a winding path. Japan is so much about gardens and the earth and understanding our relationship to them and having you bathe in forests and have it nurture your soul. So you take this meandering path into this space, which is this giant concrete cavern, basically, with two holes so that the sky and the light or rain can open up into them. So you feel like you're in nature, but you're not. And then these little drops of water begin to surface through the floor because it's situated on top of a spring. And I thought, okay, this is like a Saturday Night Live sketch about just mocking art, that you have all of these people gathered around. Well, an hour and a half later, I finally left that space because you start to watch these little droplets emerge from the floor, and then they slide across the floor. This is all natural things that happen. And then they join other pools, and you realize, well, it's just like us. We join communities. We want to collect. We want to be together. And then you start to, again, look around the room, and you see people experiencing this in different ways. It sounds totally outlandish and demented, but if you experience it, it was phenomenal.
Is there not a Kusama installation in town somewhere right now for those who haven't seen it?
There is at the Wonder Museum.
Where's the Wonder Museum?
It's in downtown Crossing.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Have you done a Kusama thing?
No.
Do you know I'm in Seattle?
Yeah.
And I want to go to Kusama
Yes,
exhibit. And
and
unfortunately,
Jared set you up.
there are lines around the block. So I said, Jared, can you help me out? It's like 8 or 9 years ago. He says, yeah. He called somebody. They called me. He said, absolutely. And I assumed that meant I was going to get a ticket. Instead, the whole family got an exclusive, and there were multiple rooms. Have you seen any of the Kusama stuff?
I've just seen pictures.
You cannot imagine.
You.
There's no way to describe how powerful. And go ahead.
So here's another part of it. So they're big into Kusama there, of course, because she's a Japanese artist. So on Naoshima, you have a section. They've just built this new pavilion where, because her big thing is dots. It's part of how she sees the world.
Yeah, we should describe what you're talking about.
Well, it's really hard. I try to describe.
It is hard. So a lot of people know her through the Infinity Mirror Rooms.
Yes.
So you walk in a space that's all mirrors, and she's created this landscape of dots and color, not always color, but often color, that protrude from the floor, and then you find yourself in the space and you look around, and it's kind of like looking into infinity because you can just see and see and see reflection after reflection after reflection of yourself and all of these dots and dazzling lights. So what she's done in this latest installation at Naoshima is all of these silver balls, and when you first walk up, because by the way, you're just walking around this island encountering museums and encountering installations, and it was very quiet that day, and you can kind of hear this rustling of the balls in this water, and they're again all kind of pooling in this little pond. And then you walk further up, and you see her dots in this pavilion built just for her, and it's just magical to see this interruption of nature with her vision.
Got to see it though. I mean, no, that was a great description.
Okay,
but you really got to see it.
How about any forest bathing around here? Is there any of that?
I don't know about that. Can I tell you about one other thing?
Yes.
Sure, why not?
It's really fun.
Everybody listening is going to be in Japan soon, I'm sure, anyway. So, like me and Marjorie included.
It's aspirational.
Okay, tell us one more thing.
I've seen so much art, and
Go
I've
ahead.
never seen things like these, which is, so that's why I was so excited about it. So there's a French artist, and his name is Christian Boltanski, and he created the Archives of the Heart. So this is on Teshima. Get on your bicycle and go over there, although I think you can take a car or something. And you walk in, and there's this chamber with these panels on either side of the wall, one light bulb suspended from the middle of the ceiling. The door closes, and you just hear this pounding of hearts. He has collected heartbeats from people since 2008.
Wait a minute. Dead heartbeats from what people?
From real. I hope not dead, because mine is now there.
They recorded yours is now there, so they recorded their heartbeats.
So he's recorded
the heartbeat of dead people. I've found to be not that powerful.
Oh, that's right.
Well, I thought he had them artificially pumping
details.
Or something.
No, so you go into this room, and it's just this throbbing sound of heartbeats, and the light is pulsating with it, and it's just such a bizarre experience. But then you can contribute, as I did. I recorded my heartbeat so that my heartbeat is now
we have that?
part of the art. I don't think so.
Okay.
By the way, if there's a cardiologist listening, maybe they should listen to mine, because it was a little weird.
Wait, how is it weird?
There was a little extra beat.
Listen to this. Cape Cod Museum of Natural History, thank you, Jamie, offers forest bathing experience
What
for
is
$12.
forest bathing?
Well, explain
Where you
it,
get
Jared.
naked
You've
in the
done it.
forest and
No,
you
don't
get
naked.
rained on? What
It's
happens? Seriously.
1.5 miles round trip, 90 minutes, 15 and up, $12.
What is it?
Pre-registration
What
required.
is it? What is a rainforest?
You've done
bath?
It's
Whatever
basically
it is.
a hike. It's basically just being in nature, understanding the power of nature, and just relaxing.
Well, it does
and
nothing for me. Okay, so forget farthest. I mean, no, it's. I don't mean it does nothing,
Does
but it's
nothing
like a
for you.
hike. It's like a hike in a forest.
Yeah.
kind of
Anyway,
thing.
I found one other person's heartbeat. I know you like to do this. A friend of ours.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend. I'll tell you later.
Who?
Really?
Because you can look up people's heartbeats when you get there.
You can?
Yeah.
So if we go, we could see Jared Bowen's name.
You can look up my heartbeat.
That is pretty exciting.
It was so interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, welcome home. We miss you.
So Great Gatsby has been around forever, but whenever I hear about some new iteration of Great Gatsby, I get very excited. So tell us what's going on at the ART in Cambridge.
Well, speaking of likely Broadway-bound musicals, this probably is one where we were just talking about Florence and the Machine, Florence Welch, in a different context, but here she's written the music. So there's a Gatsby show on Broadway right now, and then there's one at the American Repertory Theater. The reason is because the Gatsby has entered the public domain now, so anybody can have that material without having to pay licensing fees. So I haven't seen the one on Broadway, but the one at the American Repertory Theater is a stunner, because this is a piece that really focuses less on who Gatsby is in terms of the relationships and the love triangle and the romance of the 1920s as what is this time in the 1920s? What are people trying to pull themselves up from? What are they trying to move forward to? Obviously, this is a huge part of the novel, but this is the American dream. I can come from nothing and I can build myself up and I can find something, but at what peril? And so a lot of that comes to the fore, but it's very decadent. It's very explosive. I would say for when I saw it, because they're still working, at that point they were still working, and just finished working on it because it'll go, again, likely go to Broadway. The first few minutes were kind of rocky, but then there's this nightclub scene, again, 1920s, flappers, all bets off because we're having a lot of fun. And you realize with this great pounding music, lots of brass, lots of horns, getting into the 20s, lots of sex, lots of sultriness, then you're in this environment and then the musical just takes off.
How did this happen without the tax credit?
This is a local theater, so this would incentivize, I would argue, more local theaters to think even bigger.
Like
Not that they have to think big, but it
How many
helps.
years before something's in public domain? 70, 75, is it? What is it?
70, I think it's now 75.
75, okay. You know, we want to talk because this incredible photography show was some of the most beautiful. I haven't seen it, but I've seen photographs of the photographs. Robert Frank and Todd Webb. The reason we want to talk about it today is it closes, coincidentally, on the same day the legislature goes home for 5 months. So we figured to celebrate their 5 months vacation. Robert Frank and Todd Webb, tell us about this.
Yeah, this is a show at the Addison Gallery of American Art in Andover, which is always free. It ends on July 31st. We know Robert Frank. If you don't know the name, you certainly know his images, because he was somebody who, in 1955, crossed the country and took a bunch of photographs of America and created this photo book that really changed the nature of photography and what photography could do, because they were, in many cases, these raw, very direct photos. If you think about the 50s, segregation, racism, a lot of that is captured here. What this show does is make us realize he wasn't the only one who was doing this. So there were actually 2 people who received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation. The other was Todd Webb, who had been a pretty well-known photographer. He was palling around with people like Georgia O'Keeffe and de Kooning, and he had great friends. So did Robert Frank, but there were 2 very different figures. Robert Frank was a foreigner coming from Switzerland. He was Jewish, and he was driving across the country. He was harassed for being either a foreigner or for being Jewish and being in America, especially when traveling through the South. Todd Webb was on foot or by boat or by scooter crossing the country. But what you see when you see this exhibition of both of their photographs together is that in 1955, clearly there were ways of looking at America that resonated with both men, even though they didn't know each other. They didn't know they were both on this project at the same time, crossing the country, but a lot of the same images surface. So it makes you, for me, it gave me a much deeper understanding, I think, of this country and what really resonated. And for them, it was things like cowboys and diner counters and American flags and grave sites and trolleys, all things where you found people gathering, where you find society being society.
All black and white, right?
All black and white.
It's fabulous. And it's free, as you said a minute ago. You know, we're out of time, but we should say, since we were talking about Japan, Art of Japan at the MFA will revisit when we see you next week.
Because it's a permanent
opening kind of
What's
deal.
on the show today?
We've been having Jumping the Shark Week. Talking about, so we're not doing Shark Week like the Discovery Channel is, but what in the pop culture and cultural world has jumped the shark.
idea.
So today Joyce Haywick will be on with
Let's do the mandatory. We love Joyce Haywick because we do. Go ahead.
And we're also going to talk about quilling, which is quilling, not quilting, but quilling, which is an ancient art form that a woman has revived to great effect.
Now, Jared, before you go, Marjorie and I are contemplating after the show going rainforest bathing. If you were free after your show, you could join us halfway into the bath.
It's not rainforest
What is
bathing.
it?
It's just forest.
It's just straight up
forest
bathing.
Sorry, forest.
It doesn't have to be raining,
Oh, wait,
Jim.
if it's not rainforest bathing, I am not going. You told me it was rainforest bathing.
Well, I
we
think
have
with
a
rainforest
we have a
bathing, you have
texter who
pythons.
says Jim prefers to wake up at 5 a.m. and walk on his basement elliptical in his concrete jungle until he goes to sleep.
Well, we're going to talk about that, by the way, a little bit later in the show, so don't blow it, okay?
Okay.
Jared, nice to see you.
Thank you
Welcome
very
home,
much,
Jared
Jared.
Bowen.
We've been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show, which airs at 2 o'clock right here on 89.7 GBH and airs right here at the Boston Public Library for their Week in Review on Friday. Jared, thank you very much.
See you, Jared.
Up next, Democrats are calling for a criminal investigation into Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas over his ethics violations. About time. We'll talk about this and more with Carol Rose and the ACLU's getting ready for a possible Trump win this fall. Carol, of course, is director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7.
The Department of Justice has foiled several state-sponsored assassination plots in recent years. Survivors are thankful, but moving from safe house to safe house is taking its toll.
Who is going to sell a co-op to a person being followed by killers?
Learning to live a normal life with a target on your back. On All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, dedicated to generating new knowledge and applying discoveries to the betterment of society. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. And Commonwealth Shakespeare Company, presenting The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare's captivating parable of betrayals and renewed hope, is this summer's free Shakespeare on the Boston Common, July 16th through August 4th. comshakes.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are joined right now at the library desk by Carol Rose, who's the Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, who joins us every month. Carol, thank you very much for coming in.
Great to
By
be
the way,
here.
just let me apologize. The reason I
He's
did not
eating. He's
introduce
eating.
you, I was eating lunch.
Yeah, he was eating lunch.
It's unprofessional.
Gotta
I
get
know.
back from that vacation.
I was
then.
eating,
Yeah.
exactly.
Very rude.
Nice to see you, Carol.
Nice
Well,
to see you both.
So I am kind of thrilled. I'm admitting my bias, but we're going to get an investigation, possibly, of Clarence Thomas ethics violations.
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's a call for it. It's really hard to know how it's going to play out. One can only hope. But I would just say that the ethics problem on the Supreme Court is one of the themes I think we can pull out from this latest Supreme Court term, which just ended on July 1st. And it weaves its way, this lack of accountability, weaves its way not only through the decisions, but through the behavior of the justices themselves. And so I think any opportunity to bring an investigation from one branch of the government to the other should be welcomed in this
Well, it's
particular
Merrick Garland's been asked, and I have been really
by Sheldon
so
Whitehouse from Rhode Island
Yes.
and Ron Wyden from Oregon. Two
And I have
United
been
States
so
senators.
disappointed in the snail's pace of Merrick Garland. I'm not at all hopeful. Here we are in June. But, you know, this is to me another one of those no-brainers.
Right.
They're taking money right and left. It's against from people that had cases before the court. It
Right.
seems so obvious. This is a terrible conflict of interest, and I've wondered, why this isn't just a slam dunk.
Well, I think this goes to who is policing the court, if anyone. And ultimately, right now, it appears, excuse me, if the DOJ doesn't intervene, if Merrick Garland doesn't, at the request of Congress, then it's the voters.
But do you think he
it's
will?
Up to the voters.
Do you think Merrick Garland will intervene? It took him forever to do anything.
I was going to say, I think time is a problem right now.
Yeah.
And so I think the big focus, and I'll just say to all of your listeners and to all of you, this is a moment in history that we're in, and we're already in it. We're moving toward the election, and the ACLU, working with partners and elected officials here in Massachusetts and across the country, are working to build our firewalls, to make sure that we can protect ourselves and our people here, to make sure we can defend our democracy.
If Trump is elected?
If Trump is elected. And I think it's really important for people to understand that Massachusetts has a unique role to play in this, because I guess the big takeaway for me from the Supreme Court is, number one, the court's not going to save us. And number two, it matters who's on the court.
By the way, I don't want to leave this thing for a second. When I read this story this morning about, I think it was in the Washington Post, about White House and Wyden, former legal services lawyer, by the way, Ron Wyden in Oregon, making this request that a special counsel be selected by the Attorney General. To me, I read it and I said, why hasn't this happened before?
Exactly.
I mean, by the way, the issue is not, is there a civil violation? The question is, has Clarence Thomas, I don't know the answer, violated criminal laws in terms of ethics, failure to report, gift-taking, that sort of stuff? It seems to me, as a relatively sane person, there's at least a colorable claim that he has, and let a special counsel, if he or she says he hasn't, clear him.
Right, and there have been instances of a special counsel, the Hunter Biden, for example, and the others.
Perfect example.
So there are examples where Garland has done this, but why it's taken so long? Does it require the Congress to call upon it? Are they going to move? Would it even hold at this point? I mean, there's so many questions, and I as important as I want that, and I want that to happen, we have to think about the court, but the court's not going to save us, and right now the court's out of session. And so we, the people of this Commonwealth and of this country, need to be mobilizing. And our elected officials, we're so fortunate. It was so great to hear Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, on before us. She is so aware of what's happening on the ground and how we can take steps. The action is moving to the states to protect the states, and we as leaders, they as elected leaders in the state, have an obligation and an opportunity to really make sure that we put up as many firewalls as we can and that we're at the vanguard to try to turn the tide and to save our democracy.
Let me say, I obviously praise the Civil Liberties Union for being prepared, as well they should be, because as of the moment, if you follow things like the Cook Report, the next president of the United States, assuming he's running against Joe Biden, is going to be Donald Trump. But there are only so many things he can protect people from. And I'm not arguing against what you're doing, like this immunity decision, which she mentioned, which I know is so broad, and the ability of a future president, particularly Donald Trump, to do whatever the hell he pleases with the protection of the Supreme Court. It seems to me there's very little that an individual state can do to insulate themselves from the power of a lawless president, again, protected by the Supreme Court.
Yeah, somebody just mentioned to me that this is the 50th anniversary of Nixon saying, if the president does it, it's not a crime.
Yeah.
And
Was that to David Frost he said that?
Yep,
in
exactly.
an interview, yeah.
And it's like, here we are. Oh, no.
And it's true.
So, I think that the couple of themes that I think come out of all of the Supreme Court rulings that I think are worth paying attention to, and why what we do at the state matters, and there are so many things we can do. It's not all in the courts. But the real themes that came about was the dismantlement of the administrative state, right? Sort of taking away, so the Chevron doctrine, which says that you defer to the experts at the EPA to determine the quality of your water or the lead in your water or your air supply, and you defer to, the consumer division for figuring out the financial stuff. Instead, the judges are putting themselves as the deciders, where they don't have any expertise. And so this relationship between ceding power away from the experts and taking it upon themselves is one of the themes. The other theme that I think that you're talking about with the immunity that's really important and obviously is top of mind for the ACLU is really thinking about this sort of authoritarian, the granting of immunity, really broad powers in a whole lot of places. So there's obviously the U.S. v. Trump, that's a huge one, written by Roberts, by the way, which is important to keep in mind. It's just this huge grant of immunity with 3 categories, and anything done in the official position, would be totally immune. It's sweeping. It's really historically sweeping and
even
really
things
challenging.
on the outer perimeter, whatever
and then the
that
outer
means,
perimeter,
presumptively.
there's presumption. And then even on the things that, Trump didn't even ask for it, was, the things that weren't official. You can't get evidence from the time in office.
Misread Justice Roberts. I remember reading years ago that he wanted the reputation of the court and the integrity of the court to be beyond reproach. Then I've been reading in the last couple of weeks that Roberts is the driving force. This is what he wants. He's been in the majority of almost every single one of these opinions, and the court, as we've seen in the last few weeks, is John Roberts in action.
Right. And
Amy Coney Barrett, from all things, she's still very much conservative, but she seems to be less of a nut conservative than the other people.
I think that's, my opinion is that's being exaggerated. They're picking a case in which she was with the liberals.
They've picked a few, though, where in her dissent, she has been more with the liberals, or she's dissented from some of the things that the conservatives said. She's more of a traditional conservative, it seems to me.
And I just, to build on your point, which I think is a really good one about Roberts not really being an institutionalist, but he also had the authority to go on these ethics claims against Alito and Thomas, which are so egregious.
His own wife is ethically challenged.
And he chose not to do that as the Chief Justice. There's sort of like really watered down ethics rules, which is why now we have to try to find another way to get those ethics applied. But Roberts failed to do it. And if he had done that, if he had forced Alito and Thomas to recuse themselves on the Trump case, they wouldn't have had enough votes because of Amy Coney Barrett being in a concurrent. So on some aspects of it, they wouldn't have had
she was with the majority. The question is, what would she have been if it had been 5-4?
But Carol,
and that's the other big thing. It's one thing when it's 6-3, and you have that kind of a majority, and Gorsuch dissents on one case or Barrett dissents on one case. But what would they do the same if it was 5-4?
I meant 4-3, by the way. I didn't mean 5-4.
But Roberts, I would say, is ethically compromised himself because of his wife's job, and she's making
she's a headhunter.
Yeah, and as the wife of the Supreme Court justice, I just don't think that that's kosher.
Yeah, but can we, something we talk about ad nauseum here, which gets us absolutely nowhere. So why am I bringing it up again? You did that great campaign. What a difference a DA makes. We have talked we've been on the air 25 years. The only thing we've done right consistently, and this may be the only thing, because we have screwed up a lot of things, Marjorie and I, is from day one we say when you vote for the president, the single most important consideration for you is who he or she is going to pick for the Supreme Court, because they're going to be there forever. As I've said recently, my fear is Trump's reelected and Alito and Thomas, who are the oldest two justices, retire so that he can pick a 40-year-old Alito and a 40-year-old Thomas, and then you can elect 8 Barack Obamas in a row, and it doesn't matter because they're there. In light of the fact, as Marjorie always says, that almost every decision, maybe with the exception of affirmative action, sadly, is anti-majoritarian in this country. The fact that voters don't get that if you care about, and you went down the list, the two of you, starting with abortion, moving on to consumer rights, to regulation that protects you from these agencies. I could list 20. And this court is against your position if you're in the majority. And they don't say, well, it's a done deal. I'm voting for the person who's going to pick justices who are going to listen to my point of view, not pick radicals. It matters to almost nobody. You look at what matters to voters, Supreme Court picks are almost at the bottom.
Well, except I would say, I agree with you, and it's stunning to me that there aren't more people talking about this because it is so consequential.
Well, the abortion Supreme Court.
But the abortion thing, and the court really cynically kicked both of the two abortion cases down the road. They remanded them. They didn't rule against them. They remanded them to the lower court.
The guy who is responsible for the repeal of Roe v. Wade would be the next president of the United States. So you two can talk about all these local votes that were pro-choice, which they were, even in red states. Donald Trump would be president if we were voting today.
However, what is really disturbing is he's changed the Republican platform for their convention next week to soften the abortion language.
And same-sex marriage,
and same-sex marriage stuff. So he's a smart enough politician to realize those are both losing issues in much of America.
But what's really scary is the court is also kicking it down. They didn't decide. They just kicked it to after November. So
because if they decided,
would have hurt Trump.
It would have hurt Trump if they took away.
So can I pivot us, because I do think that I think this analysis is so important, and it's so important that we bring the trends out and that we, the people, the voters, see what the trends are. But then what do we do with it? How do we act? And there are so many things that we can do.
We get a visa to move to Canada.
No, I refuse. I am here. I'm going to stay.
Send me a card.
I'm going to stay and fight. I will.
Good. What's the solution?
From the underground. So the ACLU, I've been in so many meetings around the country, organizing, mobilizing, thinking about what our options are on a whole range of issues. Immigration, what are we going to do? What can we do? Free speech, what can we do? What should we do? Environmental justice, reproductive rights, of course, LGBTQ equality, all of these issues, voting rights that are under threat. And so we're coming, and the National ACLU, as a result of these, has been issuing memos on each of these areas about the things that we can do. And there are things we can do. And if you go to aclu.org, it's the National ACLU, but we're coming up with the Massachusetts plan as well. But immediately today, what people can do is call our state legislators. They're in session for another 2 weeks, and there are some couple of things they could do right now, and I think they might even do it this week.
What?
So one is to pass the Location Shield Act. This would put a ban on the sale of our cell phone data location so that we can't be tracked. And it's a reproductive justice bill because already we know that the companies that collect this data and sell it to the highest bidder, they've tracked 600 abortion clinics in 48 states, including Massachusetts.
Yep.
So
the
if you don't want to be tracked.
The people that, remember Attorney General Healy was always talking about there were 10,000 people calling sex workers for their ride home to the suburbs. So the philanderers should think about calling the state
but
house
also
as well.
like the survivors of domestic violence, right? Like you don't want to have somebody be able to track you because they can buy it. Like, and this is not about like your mapping stuff. That wouldn't be affected. You know, your Google Maps or your Waze or whatever people use. That's not affected by this. But this, and I think the House is voting on a version of the bill today, and I think the Senate's going to take it up tomorrow. This is a firewall that we in Massachusetts can put up, and I think Vermont and Maryland have actually took our model bill and they passed it. So now we're hoping that Massachusetts will pass our model bill, and that's a big step that our legislature could take and take credit for protecting the people in Massachusetts from the potential dangers that we face.
617-722-2000 is the number.
And you should incorporate the pro-philanderer constituency.
Absolutely.
I think it's a huge
There might be people in the State House that might be
I'm sure a lot of them
about that issue.
Speaking of people in the State House, this is a serious question. You're going to think it's not. Since you're a pro-small d democracy organization, why don't you take up the issue that I am obsessed with, that Marjorie ridicules me about?
What?
That the legislature, which you hope is going to do X. Somebody else earlier today was Andrea Campbell. We hope they do the rules about overseeing for-profit and private equity healthcare. We hope they do this. And why do we hope? Because they have 2 weeks until they go on a 5-month vacation. As a basic democracy thing, why aren't you advocating against them taking off half the damn year and instead dealing with all the problems we can do to insulate ourselves from an attack from the Supreme Court or Donald Trump?
Well, you know, I think let's see how it plays out for the next 2 weeks, Jim. Honestly, I mean that because I really think this is a moment. The same thing with passing the regulations on face surveillance technology. So, I mean, we just had this whole scandal with the state police, whether it's overtime or the Karen Reed trial. Well, we can do something about it, right? We can put on regulations that police and civil rights groups have agreed on. It's been proposed to regulate the use of face recognition, face surveillance technology without a warrant. So
how long have they been considering that, by the way?
It's been since 22.
22.
We have the least effective legislature in the United States of America. We have the most secretive legislature.
That's an objective analysis, by the way.
Yes, in the United States of America. We can't even find out how your legislators vote on stuff. I mean, I would say there's significant corruption in that at the State House. And I think the fact that we're in the biggest housing crisis we could imagine, and the people that are voting against things that would help housing are massive, in some cases, real estate owners themselves. I mean, no one seems to care about this.
Well, I think a lot of people do care, actually. Yeah, I do think a lot of people care. And I know I think there's even ballot initiatives and things like that that are out there that are moving through. So I think people care about our government representing us and being transparent on their votes. And I think people do care about that. But I also want to just see some of these firewalls against a potential authoritarian regime at the federal level coming in. Time is of the essence. And, you know, I'm not a huge Bill Belichick fan, but wasn't his motto do your job?
Yeah.
That's a little bit
He's
where
unemployed. I don't know if you know that. Well, actually, he's not unemployed. He's just not doing
I don't think that's the reason.
No, he's busy with other things.
You know, while our basic rights are at
How old
great
is your girlfriend?
risk.
Is she 24?
She's like 11. So
she's not 11.
Oh, that's right. That'd be illegal.
She's over
like
age. She's
19
I think
or
she's
something.
24.
That's plenty.
That was a joke.
Which was a joke?
Says your lawyer.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, it was a joke. I was totally joking there. What I'm not joking about is while we don't know if we can protect ourselves from the Supreme Court, we do know the Civil Liberties Union is protecting us and protecting our ability to give the finger to a cop. Is that That is true,
I love
correct?
this one.
God, that was one of my earliest cases as a baby
I thought it just happened.
lawyer.
God, did you represent Jim Browdy on Morrissey Boulevard?
I did not.
This
give
was
my
a different case.
I did not
This was years
give
ago.
the finger to that cop, Marjorie,
okay.
and you know that.
That's his
no, there's
story.
a brand new case. I thought where they were in. Is it in Vermont?
I think you articulated it instead.
Wait a second. You don't know about this case?
I think I read about it, but
Okay,
I'm
well, let's
not up to
talk
speed
about
on
it.
it.
But that's a First Amendment issue. Is that what it?
To give the finger to a cop.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm not arguing you should do it. But I'm not arguing. But it's speech, right?
Correct.
You're not threatening the police officer.
Correct. Well, I mean, it could depend on the totality of the circumstances, but I can't imagine that it would
No,
be free
Jim's
speech.
position is you shouldn't have to use you should be able to say it. That's your position.
It's certainly expressive
Correct?
conduct.
Well, it was said to me about 300 times by that cop, so I said it back to him possibly once or twice. I mean, you are really incredible.
We were all stuck in traffic for like 2 hours, but
Okay,
Jim
fine.
drove across the
We don't
median
need to
strip
hear
on
the story
Morrissey
for the
Boulevard, right in
400th
front of the
time.
state police.
Okay.
It did not go well.
Okay, it went fine until you had to testify.
No
in
man
my
is
defense.
above the law, Jim.
Well,
no man is above the law.
Well, somebody is above the law now, as we all know.
No,
the President of the United States
Okay,
is above
so
the
one
law.
last thing before you go.
Yeah.
This gunshot technology thing
Yeah.
is a big issue. Explain what it is for people who don't know about it and what theoretically it does to help keep us safe, and then explain why you don't agree with that
Yeah, so
position.
this is one of those circumstances where like the algorithm will not save us. Technology will not save us. So these shot spotters are basically just like surveillance cam microphones that pick up the sound of gunshot, and then they put it through an algorithm, and then they put it through a person, and then they say we need to deploy because there might be gunshots. So that sounds like really good, but throughout the country there have been studies done. Chicago was the biggest study, but also on and on. And so it's the BPD, the Boston Police Department, has been using this since 2007. And it's like $4 million.
2007?
Yeah, it's been around for a while. And so we did a study, we did a public records request and got like 1,300 documents, like 1,300 documents, and went through them and found that like in 70% of the cases, the police get deployed and there's nothing. There was, similar studies just across the country about how it doesn't really work. But worse than that, the deployment of these technology is primarily in communities of color. And so there are racial disparities. If the cops get called all the time to the car backfiring or whatever, right? And we had a reference to a pinata, which was not true. They had called out for that, and then they just said it wasn't. But that's not important because there's all this other evidence that's out there about this happening. And the cities that have now abandoned it is realizing it doesn't work are Fall River here in Massachusetts, but Chicago, Dayton, Ohio, San Antonio, Texas, Toledo, Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, there's just all these places that have just said it's just not worth it. And in Chicago, there was a 13-year-old young man named Adam Toledo also, who was 13, and he was killed because the cop showed up thinking there was guns. And of course, police officers are humans. They have fear, right? They respond with the adrenaline and the fear. And if they think there's going to be a gun, they're looking for it, and they tend to act too quickly.
You want to understand, which may be naive, Carol Rose from the Civil Liberties Union. A lot of the areas where your organization may disagree with law enforcement is a matter of opinion. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. As you think something is not helpful or damaging, they think it is. The facts here are the facts. It
well, that's
seems
the thing.
to me,
it's data-driven.
And when you see the data, as you say, demonstrate that people, poor people, people in communities of color, are discriminated against. Why isn't this the end? We're not in Alabama. Why is this not the end of the discussion?
Well, that's a really great question, and I
What's
think
the
it's a
answer?
political question. I think people get, the companies who are making money on this get really involved.
Of course
the
they
budget,
do.
there's a budget fight. If I don't do this, am I allowed to move the money to something like community-based policing, where I might actually get more information and have more safety? So I think those are budget discussions often, but they're political discussions, and part of it is we need to approach this as a polity, as a people, in a way where we don't demonize. Right? We can assume, I will assume, let's just say that the people who first adopted ShotSpotter thought this was going to be a really way to keep people safe. So I think going to motives is bad. But when we then look at it and we've used it, for all this time and it doesn't work and it creates disparities and bad policing outcomes, then maybe we need to say, well, that was worth learning from, and let's not do it anymore. Let's use that same $4 million and do community policing.
Good to see you, Carol Rose.
It's
Thank
great
you
to
so
be
much
here,
for your
guys.
time.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much,
it.
Carol Rose. We have been speaking with Carol Rose, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union, who thinks you should call the State House 617-722-2000 and complain to your legislators about... Okay. I didn't hear what she said. Anyway, call and complain about anything. I think there's a lot of complaining.
Location Shield Act.
Oh, the Location Shield Act. That's the one that's going to protect the philanderers as well as women that are outside.
She isn't advocating for the philanderers. You are.
I just think why not get everybody on board, Jim? That's
Sure,
how I feel
why not?
about it. Up next.
So, what's that called? The Big Tent? What is that? The Big Tent? Big Tent.
That's
yes.
right, Big Tent. Pine Street Inn is New England's leading provider of shelter and services to homeless people in the region. Up next, we're going to talk to the executive director of Pine Street Inn, Linda Downey, about migrants jettisoned from Logan Airport and the Supreme Court outlining homeless encampments. What she thinks about that, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
It was 50 years ago.
There was not a unified African American community as it relates to school desegregation.
Boston was forced to desegregate its schools.
Many black parents were saying, "This is crazy. No, we can't send our kids into the lion's den."
What followed had a lingering impact on the city. Watch American Experience, the busing battleground. Available at gbhnews.org/busing.
Support for our programs comes from you and Tanglewood, the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, bringing Beethoven, Broadway, and more to the Berkshires. You can plan your summer at tanglewood.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
I'm Hannah Loss, BPR producer, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Pine Street Inn is New England's leading provider of shelter and services to homeless people in the region. They're increasingly focused on tackling the housing crisis directly by building housing themselves, providing permanent housing for, I believe, what is approaching now 1,000 people. We're joined now by Linda Downey. Linda, of course, is president and executive director of the Pine Street Inn, the region's largest shelter and service provider for people experiencing homelessness. Linda, it's great to see you as always.
Good to see you. Hello, Linda. So we do want to talk about some of the good news you've got involving more housing for people who need housing around here. But the Supreme Court has just issued a ruling in saying that homeless encampments are illegal, basically allowing law enforcement to arrest and fine people. We have fewer people living on the streets here than many big cities, but we do have some people. So what do you think about this?
Well, it's a horrible ruling, Margie. How are they going to enforce this? You're going to fine people and lock them up? It's just not practical. It's shifted the burden to law enforcement, shifted to really criminalizing homelessness instead of saying, how do we really think about solutions? What are the answers? In Boston, what the city council and the mayor have done has said, if you're in an encampment, we're going to offer you an alternative. If there's no alternative, we'll talk about law enforcement, but we really do want you to work with us on something solution-based. We're going to spend a lot of time, money, and it's going to be very counterproductive at the ground level on this. People are going to go to jail, potentially. They're going to come out with no services. They'll still be homeless, by the way, after you've done all that work. It was a horrible ruling, and it's unfortunate that we can't think about this in a more comprehensive way.
You know, I just want to read for a second this beautiful, horrible and beautiful dissent from Associate Justice Sotomayor, who read part of this on June 28th. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. The city of Grants Pass jails and fines those people for sleeping anywhere in the public at any time, including in their cars, if they use as little as a blanket to keep warm or a rolled up shirt as a pillow. For people with no access to shelter, that punishes them for being homeless. That is unconscionable and unconstitutional, which is beautiful and true. You know, Marjorie mentioned in her question to you, Linda, that we read something in which is really about you, that only 3% of people who are homeless in Boston, I think was the number, are on the streets, while in places like San Francisco and Portland, Oregon, it's close to 50%. Why the stunning differential?
Well, I think Boston, you know, we have fewer homeless people to begin with, right? So we're slightly smaller as a city, not much. But we've worked really hard in Boston to keep the street count low. People always say it's the weather. It's not the weather. We could, you know, have twice as many people and we wouldn't be even close to San Francisco. A lot of what happened in California is that the ability to build low-income housing is really very restricted from a zoning standpoint. It's terribly expensive. And there's a lot of NIMBYism. It's just as bad there, if not worse, than it is here. And so what you've seen is, and there's a terrific study that was done last year out in California where they surveyed about 2,000 homeless people who stay out. The data was fascinating. You know, a small amount of money could have kept people housed. To your point, Jim, about people sleeping in cars and sleeping out, some of these folks, you know, a couple $1,000s could have kept them housed. But that's not how it works. You know, you lose your housing and then you have to pick all the pieces back up. So San Francisco, I think, the couple things, they have not had low barrier shelters the way we've had in Boston. They have not been able to build the kind of housing, and we've had some success here. And we've had street teams for a long time in Boston. We've been really focused on the street. But, you know, about 10 years ago, the numbers on the West Coast really started to expand. I think at this point, California, possibly Florida, Texas, New York, account for something like 70% of the homeless population in the entire country. So it's very, very, you know, localized and concentrated there, yeah.
Well, one of the things I've read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the idea that people who are homeless are necessarily mentally ill, necessarily with drug problems, is not so true anymore because housing has become so expensive. And in places with really expensive housing, people that get evicted from their apartment and they don't have the money to get a new apartment. Is that true here too?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the housing crisis obviously at a much more intense level than anybody else. I mean, the people we serve, people are losing their housing. They're often doubled or tripled up before they come to us. They lose their housing. The fellow who just who's our keynote speaker at graduation, he was living with his mother in subsidized housing. She passed away. He wasn't on the lease. He got evicted. I mean, doesn't take much, right? And he ended up with us. You know, he's got an apartment now and he's got a job working for the post office. But I think housing is it. And I think if you look at all the data that's coming out, where you do see a high preponderance per capita is where housing is really expensive.
It's most expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really pricing people out. And then all you need to do is add a crisis, a couple of crises, a disability, and you just can't compete in the housing market like this.
Well, let's talk about that. Can we talk about the good news for a minute before we talk about some of the crisis-creating things like Logan or Maston Cass? You told us, and obviously everybody with whom you deal, a couple of years ago, that the laser-like focus was going to be building affordable, supportive housing. First of all, explain what supportive housing is, and then tell us how successful you've been, Linda Downey.
So we have been really working hard to build housing with support services for about 20% of people who are homeless. To Marjorie's point, about 20% of our folks really need intense services to get out of homelessness, right? They're struggling with mental health. They're struggling often with medical issues and with substance use. So it's a small percentage, but that group takes up a lot of beds and shelter. They take up a lot of resources in emergency rooms and other places. So we've been very focused on housing that group. We will hit 1,100 units this fall. And we've got another 100 units coming behind that. We're going to keep working. It's been, since COVID, about a 40% increase in our supportive housing numbers that we've worked with partners to develop. But give a little more
detail, the kinds of services you provide to those who
need
it.
Those big kitchens and
what do you do?
And stuff like that.
I mean, sometimes it's very simple stuff like, you know, you were homeless for 5 years, now you're in housing. Here's how you can wash your clothes and cook for yourself and, you know, run the washing machine and all that simple stuff. And for other people, it's much more complicated. How do we get you primary care? How do we get you medication? How do we work you on benefits if you don't have any?
You know, you told us, last time we saw you a few months ago, you told us a beautiful story about somebody, one of us asked you about, what is it like for somebody who finally gets their own place and gets to close the door and it's theirs? Could you share a story or something or two about what your experiences have been like of late, Lindy Downey?
Yeah, we've just leased people up right around the corner, 140 Clarendon Street,
yes.
with Beacon Communities, who have been a terrific partner. And I was up there showing some folks one of the units, and they're lovely. They're kind of hotel rooms. It was a hotel. Mm-hmm. Part of the building was a hotel. It's been converted to studio apartments, and a fellow who we have worked with for probably 6 or 7 years got housed there. And he took us in to show his apartment. I'm telling you, it was spotless. It was, the bed looked like, like you could put a quarter on the bed and it would bounce, right? It just was, and he was so proud of where he'd come from and the fact that he now had his own place. Talked a lot about the amenities in the building and they're doing field trips. They're bringing in speakers for people to hear. You don't get that in shelter. You don't get that when you're living on the street. You get to be part of this community again. And I think if anything, that is the biggest piece people talk about.
Where's the money coming from for these? I mean, you're doing some massive development stuff. Who's funding all this?
So it's usually a combination of City of Boston funding via HUD, State of Massachusetts funding. We're one of the few states in the country where we have our own housing vouchers. So there's federal vouchers and housing vouchers. So capital money from the city and state, vouchers either through the city, through HUD and the Boston Housing Authority, or through the state. And then the support services are funded through a small Mass Health program that basically Mass Health has said it's cheaper to keep people housed than have them in the ER, have them inpatient. Let's, shift some money. So that pays for a portion of the services, and then we raise private money for the rest of it. So it's a little bit of everything.
So Governor Moore Healey said migrant families who have no place to live can no longer sleep at Logan Airport. What do you think about that?
I think it's a tough call. I think the airport, as you know, at one point, I think had up to 100 families literally sleeping on the, in the lobby. I think it's been tough on the airport. They've done the best they could. I think what the plan has been is to move families out of these transitional shelters, and as they've moved families out, they've tried to pull people from the airport in. So they are trying to offer people an alternative to the airport. But it's tough. You've got to move enough people out to be able to accommodate 100 new families. That's not easy in a really tough market, and a group, frankly, that has very few options, right?
Every time we talk about this, I get text messages from people complaining that we're giving all these services to migrant families, and what about the Americans that are here, and what about the veterans that serve
Andrea
their country?
Campbell got a call about an emergency room.
That's right. Someone's complaining about
it.
It wasn't clear to me whether those people were in the emergency room because they had medical
He
problems.
thought there were a lot of undocumented people who were clogging up the...
for a place to stay.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
It wasn't clear why they were there. But in any case, he was presenting that too. His mother had to wait 12 hours to get the gash in her leg fixed. And meanwhile, there were, according to him, dozens of people that were in the country illegally, he assumed. They might have been legal, but anyway, there's that resentment.
Yep.
So what do you tell people?
Listen, it has an impact. It does. There's no way to say that it doesn't, because the system right now is under stress, right? We went from a COVID system that was under stress, and we all thought, we'd get a little breather, and then all of a sudden our numbers exploded. And so, there is a resource issue. There's no question. However, the reality is people are here, and you have to come up with the best alternative you can. If you can't fix the federal piece, which we all know needs work, if you can't fix it there and people are showing up, then you have to figure out what's the best emergency response you can come up with. I think the governor has worked really hard to say, we're going to do the best we can. It's not unlimited, though. The best thing we can do is get people work papers. That is a slow and challenging process.
But what do they do? If they have no place to live, they're living in Logan Airport, they're thrown out of Logan Airport.
Well, let's not just limit the Logan. The governor, despite the right to shelter law, said capped at 7,500 emergency shelters. I think the stay and overflow shelters is now limited to 30 days. Yep. I think you can get an extension. So whether it's Logan or these limits, what happens to these people?
Well, I think you're going to see people showing up at emergency rooms again. I think if there's enough flow out of the existing system, they'll be able to take families in gradually. And if the flow could slow down at the front door, frankly, you probably could accommodate more of these families, but it's going to be a constant juggling act until you've got a supply and demand problem. You've got huge demand and very little supply. And let's face it, we weren't exactly swimming in shelter beds before this.
Right.
The excess beds, right? So I think it's going to take a while to settle. We will see in November what that means for immigration changes in the country one way or the other. But it's a really tough one. It's a tough one.
He says he's going to have mass detention camps. That's what Trump says he's going to do, and then deport.
Joe Biden's been doing a pretty good job of deporting and not letting people in the country of late, by the way. So
yes, he has.
It's not just.
But I often wonder if in your business.
When I say pretty good, by the way, I'm not supportive of it. I
very
meant that
tough. You mean very tough.
Very tough.
But I wonder if in your business everybody talks about the fact that this is just the beginning because of climate change. That now we have economic refugees and people that are leaving to make money, people leaving because of, they're drug cartels or all these horrible things. But pretty soon it's going to be starvation and flooding and people coming here from nations around the world that are decimated by climate changes.
The climate change piece is front and center for us this past couple of weeks. Well, because it's so hot out.
Yeah.
And so many of our folks that stay out, people always worry about the winter. Of course we worry about the winter, but I worry more in some ways about right now, because if you have a heart condition or you're already, medically vulnerable, this heat is not going to do you any favors.
What do you tell
well,
people?
Street teams are good. We're trying to get people to come in, even if they don't want to take a bed. We're saying come in, just sit in the the shelters are air conditioned, come in, have something to drink and eat. Take it easy. The teams have been out, for the past few weeks saying it's really, really hot. Come in. Haven't had a lot of takers, in all honesty. Now, during the day, other buildings are open. The library's open. There's places people can go. Nighttime's a little cooler. That first wave, though, we had, I think, 6 or 7 people total that ended up in the ER.
From
either directly
issues.
heat-related or, indirectly.
Can we return to the good news and all this housing development stuff you're doing? How are you mentioned NIMBYism in passing. I don't know what we were talking about at the moment. How are you dealing with those? I remember, was it the JP project? Where was the project where there was so much trouble and ultimately the deal was...
Dorchester.
Dorchester.
How are you, when you're contemplating going into a particular neighborhood and expanding, these incredible housing opportunities and supportive services, how do you deal with what is likely to come?
Well, it's a huge challenge, as you both know. We try and go in and be as transparent as we can. We try and build if we already are in a neighborhood or we know people, we reach out to community leaders. We had a lot of help in Dorchester from the faith community, from Greater Boston Interfaith, from Not For Sale, which is a group really working on affordable housing in Dorchester. You try and mobilize the groups that are willing to be supportive. They then, you hope can mobilize other people. But sometimes it's literally a one-off where, the JP project, I think before we ever had a public meeting, even the hint of a public meeting, we had 18 or 20 meetings with constituent groups, single people, people that had questions, people we knew. So it's a lot of intensive work to try and allay people's fears, because almost all of it's fear-based. We offer people tours. Come and see a house we have now. Come and talk to a tenant. Come and see if anybody's hanging around. If I want to be able to say nobody's hanging around, sitting on the steps and bothering people. And you hope when you show up that's the case, right?
That's right.
Right. But most of our housing, you go in, it's pretty quiet. People are doing what you and I would do. They're having their coffee. They're going to work. They're getting on with their day. They're minding their business.
Is everybody else around the country who does what you do, even though most of them don't do it nearly as well as you and your colleagues, do they get this notion that this building housing is the only path out of this?
I think there's a lot more awareness of it, Jim, from even 10 years ago. And I think people do understand some people need housing and support, and that is going to end their homelessness for a long time. So I do think it's absolutely, depending on the state and the city, there is a lot of interest in some places. Our housing bond bill has some framework around supportive housing, which is great. First time ever that there's been really...
The Healy thing, the $4 billion.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
First time really in the bond bill, supportive housing has been called out specifically.
That's great.
So I think we're starting to see some progress. Still hard, still challenging. there's a lot of funding pieces you have to knit together. It could be more streamlined. It would make it faster, but we're making some progress.
So I'm sorry.
You just mentioned that going into some of your houses, you would see people doing what we do, having their coffee or going to work, which underscores the fact that there are many people who are homeless who are working. What's your sense of how many people are in that situation, that they're just not making enough money to do first, last, security deposit, the whole 9 yards?
So about 30% of our guests on a daily basis are working. Full-time, part-time, somewhere. Somewhere. Now, are they making enough to afford a market rent? Absolutely not. So they're going to either have to get a second job, they're going to have to get a roommate, they're going to have to move maybe pretty far outside the city. That sounds really simple. But if you work in Boston and you're lucky enough to have a job, we can't place you in Haverhill if you don't have a car. So, it's complicated when you don't have any backup.
One of your faults, as I've said to you many times, is you're humble, which I don't understand. I know you hate this, but I'm doing it anyway. You've been doing this. You've been at the Pine Street in different capacities, I know, for, 4 decades or something. Are you still affected when you have moments like that guy that showed you his apartment? Does it still do it to you?
I have to say, we had our graduation this year, and it is, for me, the best day of the year. It's people who came into us at Pine Street homeless, no job, no housing, and they're leaving with, at minimum, job training. They're on the housing path, and a number of them, about half of them, already have jobs. And the young fellow this year, he's a young guy, he's in his 30s, his name is Taj. It was everything I could do to not start crying when he got up there and said, look, I came in here, I had nothing, I was drinking, my mother died, I couldn't stay on the lease, and he said, I'm leaving here, he's got an apartment in Dorchester, he's working at the post office, as I said, he's now reunited with, he has a young son. He was so proud of himself, and that's the stuff that kind of just makes your heart go, wow, all this yelling at us for housing and all this, don't bring these people to the neighborhood. He's an asset to the neighborhood. Anybody should want him as a neighbor, and we ought to be promoting that and doing more of that and not thinking that, there isn't a life for people beyond homelessness.
You're amazing. By the way, it's pinestreetin.org if people want to volunteer, want to contribute, want to learn more, or whatever.
I was just going to ask you one quick thing before you go. What's going on with the Shattuck?
Is that a good answer?
Explain to people. Okay, there's a shelter. There's a shelter there.
Yes,
and a hospital there.
Yes. So Shattuck, there's a Shattuck Public Health Hospital in Jamaica Plain. It's a very, very large 13-acre campus. The hospital is moving to the south end, and the entire campus has been put out to bid. We're working with Boston Medical Center and a number of other partners to try and redevelop that campus with some low-barrier shelter, some treatment programs, and some housing. It's just kind of stuck, I think, in the both the NIMBY process. It has been scaled back. The coalition, our coalition, has gone back to the state and said, look, we're scaling this back. Does this work? And so at this point, I think we're waiting to hear what's next.
Okay, so it's in transition then.
Yes, I would say that.
Lydia, lots of luck. You're amazing. All of your people are amazing, and it's great to see you.
Thank you very much, Lydia Downey, for coming in.
Lydia Downey.
We've been speaking with Lydia Downey, who's President and Executive Director of the Pine Street Inn, the region's largest shelter and service provider for people who are experiencing homelessness. Thank you so much again, Lydia, for coming in.
Thank you.
Up next, time for Afternoon Zoo with the very soothing naturalist and author, Cy Montgomery. She's going to tell us why vets cost so much money, about people smuggling animals like coral. I didn't even know coral was an animal. And ants. Did you know this, Jim? Ants can perform amputations. Did you know that? I did not know that. We're going to find out about that from Cy Montgomery. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
The Department of Justice has foiled several state-sponsored assassination plots in recent years. Survivors are thankful, but moving from safe house to safe house is taking its toll.
Who is going to sell a co-op to a person being followed by killers?
Learning to live a normal life with a target on your back. On All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Eversource. committed to helping businesses reach sustainability goals and lower their energy use through energy assessments and custom recommendations. Learn more at eversource.com. And the Museum of Science with Survival of the Slowest, a new live animal exhibit that demonstrates evolution down the path less traveled. MOS.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Margery Egan, Jim Browdy. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We will be back here on Friday. We're joined now, though, on Zoom by Cy Montgomery. Cy is a naturalist and author. Her latest fabulous book is Secrets of the Octopus in partnership with Nat Geo. Hello, Cy Montgomery.
Hello, Jim and Margery.
Hello, Cy Montgomery. So let's start with a question I think so many pet owners wonder. Why, when they go to the vets, are they coming out with a four-figure bill or more?
Man,
yeah, for stuff that they think is not that big of a deal, like getting a tooth pulled.
I know. Gosh. Well, prices have gone up by 60% in a decade, and that's faster than it's gone up for humans. It's faster than the General Consumer Price Index. It's really rising fast, and it's scary. And part of it is because corporations and private equity firms are buying up all the veterinarian offices. Now, part of it, too, is, I mean, to be fair, it costs a lot of money to be a vet. You have to spend a lot of years on it. And why not? Because think of doctors. They deal with one species. Veterinarians have to deal with multiple species, so they have a much harder job. Plus, their patients are far more likely to bite them. So they deserve to get paid well. But besides this, there's other factors at work. And one is you can save lives you couldn't save in the past because now we have drugs and diagnostics that didn't exist before. But, you know, they cost. And if you're going to put your cat in a CAT scan or your pet in a PET scan, that's going to be expensive. Not as much as putting you in it, but those machines aren't cheap, and you're going to pay for them. But people want to.
Well, that's the thing. People do want to. I think the attitudes have changed a lot about your pet. I mean, that you would, if your pet was dying, even an older dog that would be 10 years old, retriever or something that gets cancer, you're going to do, a lot of people I know, their dogs are going through chemotherapy, which can't be that much fun for the dog, but they're trying to cure the dog. Or in this story, we talked about this, was it a cat that got the MRI? No, it was a dog actually, but still.
But cats get them too. I mean,
cats too.
Absolutely.
So
and you know what? I mean, cancer very interesting. I mean, cancer's no good. I hate cancer. But who do you think they test all the drugs that are curing people on?
Dogs.
Animals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So frequently, dogs can be cured. And they also seem to do much better with chemo than people do. It seems to bother them less. They don't blow their coats like we do. I know a number of dogs who've gone through chemo. It has saved their lives. And most of their days undergoing chemo, I mean, no one likes going to the vet, but most of their days were good days. So, I mean, you can actually have a very good outcome, sometimes better than with people going
But
through.
it's going to cost you a lot.
It sure is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most people, and I'm one of those, don't have pet insurance. Only 4% of the, like, what is it? Like 2/3 of Americans have pets, but only 4% have pet insurance. Well, I don't have pet insurance. And there's a real good reason for that. And that is that your pet insurance can, like Nationwide did to 100,000 people this spring, just drop you. And then you're stuck because nobody else wants to take you on because your pet has a pre-existing condition.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm one of the 4%. I insure the health of the dogs, both my kids' dogs, and I wish they would drop me because I'll tell you, I don't think, I may be wrong by one. We've had it for years. I don't think they've ever reimbursed the claim. There is an excuse, and we have fairly comprehensive a care, particularly concerned about what happens if something's catastrophic, which is really what I wanted to ask you about. I'm assuming, Cy, since you were probably the highest profile person in your world, that people come to you and say, to keep my dog alive or to keep my whatever alive, I've got to spend X thousand dollars, which I really can't afford, but this pet is central to my... Remember, we've told you the story of the guy with the goldfish who we thought was a joke, who spent thousands of dollars to operate on his goldfish's eye. And we thought it was a joke until he called our show. And we actually,
No, they'll do that.
We met him and he's real. So what advice do you give people, or would you give people, when they're up against whatever? They can't afford it, but they also can't emotionally afford losing their pet.
Well, sometimes, and this works with people too, you can go to a veterinary school and get a break.
Oh.
Now, you're getting someone who is working under a licensed veterinarian or a licensed doctor, but it is less expensive. So that would be one of the options that I would explore. And sometimes you can go to a regional or local SPCA, and they may have discounted programs for you. Sometimes vets will do a certain number of pro bono cases as well. So that's the kind of thing that I would suggest. But goodness, when we think of the money that we humans spend on things we care about, from cars to jewelry to entertainment, almost nothing gives you more pleasure, more joy, more fulfillment than the lives of our pets.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's gobsmacking when you say, oh my gosh, they spent $10,000 keeping their 12-year-old poodle alive. But, wouldn't you do that for your 95-year-old mother if she still wanted to be on the planet? I mean, you would do so unhesitatingly. So I totally can't blame people.
Most people would do it for the pet before they do it for the mother. But
one last thing about this. Somewhere along the line, and certainly since I was a kid, and I don't know if it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I think somewhere along the line ideas have changed. You would not, even if the chemotherapy could work, or if your dog, if a big dog couldn't jump anymore, you wouldn't get one of those harnesses. I've seen so many of my friends that like big dogs, they get the harness so they can pick the dog up, with his hind legs go. You wouldn't do that. You as we euphemistically say, put the dog down.
Right.
Somewhere,
right.
And so I'm wondering, what do you think happened? Is it that we're more isolated now?
Can I answer it?
What?
The worse the world gets, and it's pretty bad.
Is that it?
The more important your non-human companion gets. Don't you think there's truth in that?
I think you're absolutely right. And that there was another story in the Times last week about, how we are sometimes loving our pets to death. And
yes.
Their children. Well, they're not our children. They're better than our children. If we wouldn't want them so much if they weren't our dogs and cats and snakes and crabs and fish and whatever. We love them because they are something other than our relatives.
Yeah.
They're something different from
They
humans.
won't go through the teen years.
Right,
Okay.
and when things go south, with your dog or cat, we need to think of them as the special species that they are, and what kind of pleasure do they get out of their lives. And there are some dogs who I think probably would rather be dead than be able to stand up and run around and chase the ball. There are others for whom just waking up in a room with their person in it may be enough.
Oh my God.
Oh, Jim. Jim is getting tears in his eyes.
I am getting that Cy is totally right.
So
We're talking to Cy
Cy
Montgomery.
So let's move on, Cy, to something, I feel bad. I flicked an ant off my shoulder last night. I think I injured it. I didn't realize that it may have been saved by a fellow ant, maybe perhaps its spouse ant, who performed an amputation of their wound caused by me. I mean, this is incredible. Tell us about ants doing amputations.
Oh my gosh, or amputations, yeah.
Amputations, exactly.
This was recently discovered in Florida carpenter ants. and they will amputate the legs of their nestmates to prevent the spread of infection, and this is extremely effective. This adds to a whole bunch of amazing things that ants will do to help struggling companions. They even, by the way, ants will bury their dead, something that Neanderthals were not even thought to do until very recently.
In the dirt in the front yard? Is that where they bury them?
Well, they often will bury them in a special part of the nest, or they will carry them outside to an ant graveyard.
Oh,
but
ant
this
graveyard.
appears, I mean, no one knows what's going on in the little hearts and minds of the ants as they do this. They have found that this behavior is triggered by the release of a certain chemical, oleic acid, and if you drop it on a live ant, the ant will be carried out protesting like Monty Python in that, actually I think it was Cary Graham maybe, who was on the cart in Monty Python, The Holy Grail, saying, "I'm not dead yet, I'm not dead yet." The poor ant will be carried off by her sisters. But anyway, this amputation thing is amazing. There are some ants who secrete natural drugs in glands in their own bodies that they can use to prevent infection in themselves and their mates. But Florida carpenter ants lack this ability. So what they have come up with is the idea of just chewing the legs off before the infection will spread. But interestingly, it's a flexible behavior. They don't just chew their sister's whole leg off. They will chew the thigh bone, the femur, off, but not the tibia further down. They seem to somehow know that if you chew the thigh bone off, that will be extremely effective. But if you just lick the tibia, that will be effective. These scientists, I mean, it's kind of horrifying what they did. What they did was they tortured these ants.
Oh, God.
They injured 100 ants. But the nestmates, so they spent 40 minutes on this, the nestmates, doing their job. They licked and then chewed through the leg to remove it if they thought that was going to be effective. And it was amazing. 95% of the amputees survived compared to 45% of those who were prevented from helping.
Cy, Jamie had a question for you. If you were talking about these ant graveyards, do the ants in the graveyards have little tiny gravestones too, or not?
Yeah, so you can identify.
By the way,
ants are amazing. Ants, there's species of ants that keep slaves. There are species of ants who garden and create specifically a garden of fungus that is found nowhere else but in there. These are Amazonian leaf cutting ants. These are the ones that E.O. Wilson had in his office at Harvard.
Whoops.
Oh my gosh.
She froze for a second. She'll be right back.
She's frozen.
We're talking to Cy Montgomery. She is frozen up there in New Hampshire. It's not freezing in New Hampshire, but her connection is frozen. I assume somebody's going to try to get Cy. And there
back.
she is. She's
back.
Cy. Okay. I don't. Were you? One thing that I was wondering about, which may have been a stupid wonder, but the ants who are having their legs amputated, they don't have a problem with it. They don't feel any pain.
I bet they do.
No, I thought we read in the story they just sit there and allow it to happen. Does that?
Apparently.
Well,
apparently. And who knows? I mean, with ants, a lot of stuff is chemically mediated. Ants who are in danger will often give off a special odor to which all her nestmates will respond. And her nestmates cannot help but respond to that. For instance, oleic acid is one of them, that they can't help but respond to it. So who knows if something is happening chemically to these ants so that they are, paralyzed during this period. Who knows if they can turn off any kind of pain or fear. I strongly suspect that ants feel pain because it is so useful. It is so important to feel pain, so you take your foot off the radiator before it cooks, all of this stuff is there to help us, so I expect they do feel pain. But you're correct, they do not struggle when they are being ministered to by their sisters.
You know, Marjorie introduced this topic by saying that, you know, she flicked the fly. I bet you have the same feeling that I'm about. No, I was just going to say, there was a fly in my not a fly.
There's a fly right here
in my bathroom this morning, and this is honest to God true, and I was about to crush it and throw it in the toilet, and I thought of you.
That's right.
And I scooped the damn thing up and threw it outside.
There you go.
I do the same.
Of course you do.
I mean, if they're biting you, I'm very familiar with ants from the tropics, and a lot of them will bite you. Some of them will sting you. Some will sting you while they're biting you. And those guys, you know, I will crush them rather than be.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
I crush mosquitoes, I must say.
You know, if some other
right on my
person came along and bit me, I would crush them too.
Yeah,
So-
I think there's certain things.
That's comforting. We're talking to Cy Montgomery.
It's a self-defense kind of thing, you know, in some cases.
Right.
Speaking of self-defense, there was a story from CBS News talking about people down the Cape going to the beach, even in places where they see a lot of sharks, like the Cape Cod National Seashore, say they're not that worried about sharks. So what is the correct approach? Were you to go down to the National Seashore to Wellfleet, where they've got a lot of seals and therefore have sharks, how would you approach swimming?
I would not be worried swimming 50 feet off from the beach.
50 feet?
Yeah. You know, most people don't even go more than 50 feet off.
Yeah.
Most people don't go deeper than their waist. And in fact, you know, you are advised not for sharks, but just for not drowning or being knocked over by a wave. The safest thing is to stay in water up to your waist. The closest, and don't swim with the menu either. You know, sharks
seals,
don't want to eat us.
Yeah.
We don't taste good. When they bite us, they usually spit us out.
That's comforting.
Because we don't taste any good at all. So it's a mistake, ow, but it is an honest mistake. So don't swim near seals. And a great app to get on your phone is Sharktivity,
Yes.
which will show you where all these celebrity sharks are. They just added, last year, they added 100 new shark IDs to I think there's like 700 being monitored right now.
Yeah, but if they're not tagged, you know, the one that bites you.
Oh, right.
If it's not tagged, you're not really.
Well, they had, you must know about this, the idea of drones patrolling beaches where there are a lot of sharks.
Where did we read about that a few weeks ago?
I
Where was
forget.
that happening?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was Australia.
Was it?
Great idea.
I think it was,
And wouldn't it be fun
Yes.
to be the drone operator? I'd love to do
Exactly.
that.
And then the drone operators will alert the authorities to say that there is a shark in the water, so people should beware. But 50 feet from shore, I'm with you. I go waist deep if that.
I'd go 50 inches from shore. That's about as far as I'm going in the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, remember that moment in Jaws where you kind of thought the sharks were out deeper, and they said that most shark attacks occur in 3 feet of water within 10 feet of shore? I mean, that got my attention, I'll tell you that.
But not great white. I mean,
Not great whites.
Little
That's right.
sharks might give you a nibble, but the great big sharks, they don't want to come that close to.
They're too big. I would
I
think.
know they'll get beached. They don't want to do that.
They can't. They'd be
And
beached.
When you look at all the sharks, like 8 sharks were spotted off the Cape last week, but look at where they were. I mean, one was seen by a whale watching outfit.
Yeah.
That's, no one's swimming out with a whale watch boat coming right next to them. Another was seen from a plane. There was one of the sharks who I follow. What was her name? Her name was Lee Beth.
What do you mean you
Do
follow
you know
her?
about Lee Beth?
No, you follow her. How do you do that?
Oh, on Sharktivity.
Oh, on Sharktivity. Okay.
She is. She's a record setter for science. I read she was like a long haul trucker with gills and pointy teeth. She's been in 3 countries since June, and
Wow.
she was 40 miles off Nantucket, and recently in June, and now she's up off of PEI. Really, really cool.
What's PEI?
Prince Edward Island.
Oh, Prince Edward Island.
By the way, I
Okay.
follow a shark too. You know what its name is? Hannibal Lecter is the name of it. Every time we talk to you about sharks, I really want to be as calm about it as you are. Maybe it's the media, maybe it is Jaws from, what was that, 50 years ago
I know.
or something?
I'll never forget.
And Peter Benchley.
Yes.
And there's another.
Shark Week. Was it Shark Week this week or last week?
You haven't seen the movie Under Paris. Have you seen Under Paris?
That was the sharks in the sewers.
You would never watch it. No, sharks in the Seine.
In the Seine. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
It's not real.
Well, they are now looking to see if sharks are going to show up in Europe. Folks are thinking, like, when are we going to get some great white sharks?
Oh, that's a great point. Why are there no great white sharks in Europe?
No one really knows. I was contacted by a newspaper a couple of days ago. I don't know, but I sent them to Greg Scommel, who, of course,
yes,
shark guy.
Are there seals in Europe?
There are seals in.
So the sharks just haven't figured it out yet. They'll be there soon. Yeah.
But yeah, that's in Ireland is where the legend of the selkie came from. That seals will turn into women and you can fall in love. There's all these wonderful stories about animals that turn into men and women, and men or women fall in love with them, and then the animal goes back into animal form and leaves them.
Wow.
I love those stories because they remind us that we are all sort of one and that we owe each other something important.
That's
that
right.
we can see the souls of each other even though we may be different species.
I'll tell you, do I want to be Cy Montgomery when I grow up or what?
Oh, I know.
Your approach to life is so beautiful.
Not killing any more ants. The mosquitoes, I may have to sacrifice a few, but the ants.
Hey, Cy, it's great to see you.
We don't
be well.
Yeah.
Talk to you in a week or so.
Thank you very much, Cy
Stay
Montgomery.
cool.
Yeah,
She's
doesn't that
amazing.
lift your mood to talk to Cy Montgomery? Certainly
Lifts
lifts
my
mine.
mood.
That's right. Because, the animals will, at least some of them will be with us, although with climate change going the way it is, who knows how many will still be here, Jim. I don't want to be
That's an upbeat
depressing.
note. Go
I don't
ahead.
want to be depressing about
Thank
that.
you for that.
We were speaking with Cy Montgomery. She's a naturalist and author. Her latest book is Secrets of the Octopus in partnership with Nat Geo, but she's got a bunch of great books. So if you Google her name, Cy Montgomery, you'll see many wonderful books. She's a wonderful writer as well. Up next, Jim Braude is a member of the 5 a.m. cult.
I am.
I mean the club. He's up and at it before 6 every day, frantically texting every contact in his phone. There are throngs of people, though, that are just like Jim, who say getting up early has changed their lives.
It has.
We'll open the lines to ask you about it. Are you an early bird, or do you like to sleep in? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, a Framingham-based card company is restoring the lost art of quilling. And no, it's not writing with a quill. It's the ancient craft of making art by coiling strands of paper. We talked to Hung Wolf and her unlikely path to making this her mission, which includes breaking 2 Guinness World Records. Then Boston Ballet is popping up all over this summer by way of its portable dance dome. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Carr Financial Group, independent fiduciaries committed to guiding investors through the changing economy with wealth management, financial, and retirement planning services. Consultations can be scheduled at carrfinancial.com. And Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, an exhibition featuring over 700 historic artifacts from the Holocaust. Now open at the Castle at Park Plaza in Boston. More at theauschwitzexhibition.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So is rising at dawn the secret to happiness? Or does it just inflate your sense of self? We're going to close the show by asking about the 5 a.m. risers, of which I am one. I've told this to Marjorie and my coworkers. It has changed my life. It's life-altering. I wake up early. I do a couple of things, a little reflection, a little coffee.
A little reflection.
I knew that I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, God.
Ignore that. A little elliptical stuff, and I'm more ready to be productive and, most importantly, not rushed. Others might disagree with how it affects my mood, but just imagine, Marjorie, what I'd be like if I didn't
I know.
do that.
I tell you, everybody remarks what a wonderful, cheerful person you are that I meet somewhere.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, in any case, I'm in great company. My favorite wellness influencer, as you know, Marjorie, Gwyneth Paltrow, is a longtime member of the 5 a.m. cult, sharing her routine on Instagram. This is what she does. We read this morning. She starts with an early morning... She starts with an early morning 30-minute tongue scrape.
Tongue scrape.
An Ayurvedic oil pull before settling down for 20 minutes of transcendental meditation. Same here, Gwenny. The phone and text lines are open at 877-301-897. This is a serious thing. Are you a member of the 5 a.m. cult, as they call it? And what does it mean for your life? And you know, Zoe or Jamie or somebody raised an interesting point today. If you're up at 5 a.m., but you remember the term we learned, herkle-durkle, where you stay in bed until the need for coffee compels you to rise, are you a member of the club or are you not? By the way, I'm serious about this. As somebody who hates nothing more than being rushed in life, getting a slow start to the day by getting up a little earlier than you might otherwise is the road to salvation. The number is 877-301-8970. Are you part of the 5 a.m. cult or club? If you are, why? And if you're not, why not?
Do you want to play a little of Gwyneth, her guided meditation?
I'd love to, yes.
This is Gwyneth Paltrow, of course. She's famous for her Goop line of products. She's made millions and millions of dollars.
And for tongue scraping.
Tongue scraping. I'm not exactly sure.
What is tongue scraping?
Well, a lot of people do it with their toothbrush.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, but I don't think you have to do it for 30 minutes.
I don't know.
I mean, 30 minutes? What are you doing? Your tongue would be exhausted.
What'd she say?
Anyway, here's a Gwyneth Paltrow guided meditation to advertise her Moments of Space app.
Bring your awareness to something in your inner or outer world, be it a sight, sound, or sensation. Let this sensory detail become your anchor by witnessing all that you can about it. Allow yourself to be cradled in this peaceful moment where time slows and worries gently fade away.
Okay.
We hope you found a moment of space.
We found a moment of space. And by the way, I find my moment of space in the morning while I am tongue scraping. So you can multitask. Yeah. By the way, again, I say this often, we never take calls out of order, but if someone engages in tongue scraping, even if it's not at 5 a.m., we'd love to hear from you. 877-301-8970.
I don't know how you pronounce this
Ayurvedic.
word.
I have no idea, that's true.
Oil pull?
Oil pull.
Oil pull.
Jamie, can you look that up?
We don't know. Okay. We don't know what that is either.
We don't need to
know.
But
Gwyneth is big into both of those.
What time do you get up, by the way?
I get up not at 5. I get up at 5:30.
No, you
get up
don't.
At 5.
You
I
do. That is the biggest.
I do.
You do not.
I do. Because I don't have my phone on and to answer your texts that begin very early in the morning. I had to reprimand Jim a while ago. This is before you were with us, Jamie, where he's texting our staff. You know, they're like in their 20s.
They're our coworkers.
They might go out.
Our
Okay,
staff.
our coworkers. They might, because some of them are young, might like to go out on a Friday or Saturday night and have some fun. But no, Jim Browdy has to text them at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. I mean, come on.
And what do I say, by the way? This is unfair. What do I say when I text them on Saturday morning? Honestly, have you done your tongue scraping yet? If they have not done their tongue scraping, it is very hard to enter the weekend. And also, when you're looking up Ayurvedic, whatever the hell it is, oil pull, let us know what tongue scraping is, too.
Okay, let's begin with Alan on the road. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Alan, what's up?
Hey, guys, how are you?
Good.
I'm an early morning riser. I like to get up and go to the gym.
Yeah.
It's a good way to get that done and out of the way.
Yeah.
And I'm not stealing that time from my family or anything. You know, it's kind of like extra time. I'll say the hottest thing about it is going to bed early.
Yeah.
It's very hard to go to bed early. But, you know, Alan, I think, are your kids little? How old are your kids?
12 and 14.
Oh, they're not that little. But I know so many people, especially mothers, that would try to get up before their kids so they could get stuff done in the morning.
That is exactly what it's all about.
Or they do it the night before. Like they make the sandwiches for school and the snacks for thing. They do it the night before. But to feel like you have a little peace and quiet before all the noise and the bickering starts. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Alan, doesn't it also, the key for this is not just the 5 a.m. experience, but doesn't it set you up better for your whole day kind of thing?
It does for me, yeah. And there is one kind of sadistic bonus to it.
Please.
The people who call or email me at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, that's when I return the phone call.
I like that. I like your style, Alan. Thank you very much for the call. Oil pulling is an ancient dental hygiene practice with roots in traditional Indian medicine and Ayurveda. The practice involves swishing an edible oil, such as sesame or coconut oil, in the mouth for a set amount of time before spitting it out. So there you are.
Okay, this is someone who says, I get up and walk in town starting at 5:30. We discuss the news in our own personal morning, MOURNING edition, to kickstart the sadness and readiness for the election season.
I have some very good news. You want to hear it? The next caller, do you know what he does?
His tongue. Oh, he scrapes his tongue. Aaron from Wellesley, tell us, please.
What's up?
It's Aaron.
Oh,
Aaron,
sorry,
Aaron. Oops, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
I scrape my tongue. I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And actually, if I had to choose between brushing my teeth and scraping my tongue, I would scrape my tongue.
Okay, wait a minute.
What is it?
What do you scrape your tongue with?
And what do you?
It's a little metal, U-shaped device.
Okay.
And you hold the two ends of it, and then the top of the U or the bottom of the U just goes on your tongue. And it just scrapes off any, gunk that's on there.
Okay, so I remember my dentist telling me to do this years ago, but I did it with my toothbrush. So why can't you just do it with your toothbrush instead of the little metal thing?
The metal thing is just much more effective.
Okay.
Now, Aaron, since you do, how do you pronounce your name again? I don't want to mispronounce.
Aaron, E-R-I-N.
Aaron, I'm sorry. Aaron, I was thinking of hiring someone to do tongue scraping for me. Is this something you have to do yourself? Or
yes.
It is.
Yes,
okay,
I think
okay.
So.
Aaron,
but wait, I have one more thing.
Please.
I just saw this on someone posted it to my Facebook feed.
Yeah.
It says, "Due to unfortunate circumstances, I am awake. Please respect my privacy at this difficult time."
Oh.
Wow.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Aaron, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. And by the way, in a moment of seriousness, the beauty of being up, I set my clock at 5:22. Don't ask me why, but that is the time I get up every day. Nobody reaches out to you. Almost nobody. You may have some emails and texts from the night before, but it is quiet and you're alone, and that's huge.
Here's a good one. I can totally relate to this.
It's called winning the day is the expression.
Winning the day.
Most people say
John
that.
from
Thank
Peabody
you.
says he gets up every morning before 5 because he's a truck driver and he moves heavy equipment from job to job in the natural gas industry. Getting out early, he gets more done before the commuter traffic hits the road and clogs everything up. When we used to do morning radio at our old station, we'd have one of the great things about it is there was no traffic.
Oh, that's a good
You
point.
could drive to work at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, that was great.
That was not great,
Yeah.
but you could get there without any traffic.
But
That
what did we always say when we had to get up to get there at 3 o'clock? What did we always say was the problem?
How horrible it was to get up at 3
Well,
o'clock
that
in the
too.
morning.
But what was the other thing? You always said this almost every day.
What
when
did
you
I
got to work.
say?
No time to scrape your tongue. That's what you get up and you have to get to work at 3. It is really hard to
Jim,
do tongue scraping
you
at like
misquoted me.
2:45.
I was concerned about my oil pull. That was
Oil
the thing
pull.
that I really needed to do, and I
By the
felt
way,
I
do
didn't
you
have
think,
time.
Gwyneth Paltrow, she also inserts
She's made billions.
ivory eggs into parts of her body that
does.
she'll remain unnamed
That's right.
or undescribed.
Yep.
Do you think she does all this crap, or is she just pulling a big move on everybody?
I don't know, but as you reminded me this morning, she's married to the brother of the guy that ran for governor here in Massachusetts.
What's his name?
I forget his name.
So do I. He ran as an independent. What was his name? He's actually a very good guy. What's his name? Evan Falchuk.
Evan
We love
Falchuk,
Evan.
that's right.
Evan's brother is a big Hollywood producer or something.
That's right, that's right.
And Evan is a normal person, would you
He
not
did that
say? I don't know
American
his
Horror
brother.
Show or
He
whatever.
did?
I think so,
No,
yeah.
his brother did.
The brother did, exactly,
Yeah,
the one that's
okay,
married to
fine.
Gwyneth. But
Okay.
she is obviously not an American Horror Show.
Oh,
that's
guess
for
what we
sure.
have right there?
Another tongue scraper.
I hope so.
Linda
in Boston.
Hi, Linda.
What's up?
Hi.
Hi.
Two things.
Yeah.
I read an article about tongue scraping a long time ago.
Sure.
And although I didn't buy the little metal tongue scraper, I started brushing my tongue and the insides of my cheeks
Wow.
as I brushed my teeth.
Right.
And it just made such a refreshing difference. I've
Okay.
continued it years.
But doesn't it tickle? I mean, isn't that part of the
it doesn't
problem
tickle.
too,
It doesn't
Linda?
tickle.
Does it tickle or is it not?
It does, but, well, I got used to it, and now I even use my electric toothbrush to do it.
Well, that's great. Linda,
It
thanks.
works.
Now,
by the way, the problem is we were talking about being part of the 5 a.m. cult, and this is evolved into a discussion of tongue scraping, which was
Yes.
not our goal.
Well, other people that are very famous are part of this 5 a.m.
Who?
cult. Jennifer Lopez,
She is?
Jennifer Aniston, the Kardashians, and who wouldn't want to follow what they're talking
Yeah.
about?
Who else?
Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, your favorite political candidate who refuses to become a political candidate, Michelle Obama.
She is my
Yep,
favorite.
Apple's Tim Cook, he's done quite well for himself.
Or Tim Apple, as Donald
Tim
Trump used to
Apple,
call
that's
him,
right.
yes.
And Twitter founder Jack Dorsey, Anna Wintour, the woman that's done Vogue for a million years.
good.
All those people are part of the morning morning thing, and the idea is that it supposedly makes you more productive. And people have other things that they do besides scrape their tongue. Apparently, turmeric lattes are very big in this crowd, Jim.
That's the same with me.
And a gratitude journal.
Can I tell you
to
something?
fill out your gratitude journal and then do a few sun salutations. That's a yoga thing.
I'm doing a lot of that.
Okay.
Now, let me just tell you, in all seriousness, because I want people to consider this seriously, it really this is not a joke. It has changed my life. If people believe, as I do, that rushing into the day means everything will be a disaster for the rest of the day, you get to plan your day. You get to ease into your day in a way that makes everything less frenetic and far more peaceful. And by the way, I can't believe you, Ms. Yoga. I can't believe you don't, I mean, you say you get up at 5:30. It's a lie. I can't believe, no, I mean, everybody knows you're lying. I mean, you do not get up at 5:30.
I do. During the week. I don't do it on the weekends.
I didn't say the weekend.
Yeah.
Raise your right hand and say I got up at 5:30.
I showed you my alarm.
I don't care
it's
about your
there.
alarm.
Monday, Tuesday,
You
Wednesday,
probably
Thursday,
fixed
Friday.
it. What time do you get up?
5:30.
She had her hand raised.
I did.
So why don't you call
Absolutely.
me at 5:30?
Because I think I talked to you enough during the day, Jim. I don't need to start at 5:30 in the morning. Susan and
I'm a little
Hudson, thank you.
disappointed,
Thank you
actually.
for calling.
Hey, Susan, what's going on?
Well, hi.
Hi.
It's for me. It's all about the poop.
Oh, that's great. Thank
if
you.
I
Why don't you
don't
go to
give
the
myself
Sen
enough
before the Olympics? And go, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's important. We're talking about production.
Yeah.
If I don't give myself enough time, it's gone. It's not good. And so you must give yourself enough time to relax and produce.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, there you go. I mean, by the way, to each his own. Obviously, that matters to Susan, and we appreciate that. Susan, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970. We theoretically are talking about whether or not you're part of the 5 a.m. club, meaning you get up sometime before 6 o'clock every day. The problem, by the way, is you got to go to bed really early. You
do
really
have to go at
Or
9
you're
o'clock.
sleep deprived, which
Yeah.
ruins everything else, too.
Okay. This is a nice one.
What is it?
My husband is a 5 a.m.er, and I am an 8 a.m. Herkler-Dürkler. Now, Herkler-Dürklers are people that stay in bed.
Zoe
right?
said she does
Yeah,
that.
that's a Herkler-Dürkler. I'm not sure if they cover themselves up with the covers or what they do in
They
there.
cover themselves in Ayurvedic oil from head to toe.
And this texter says that her husband loves the quiet morning alone, and when I wake up after Herkling-Dürkling for 3
Yeah.
hours, I text him the coffee cup emoji so he knows I'm awake and
that's
he brings me
beautiful.
coffee in bed. Isn't that lovely?
An anonymous texter says, I would love to call in, but I scraped my tongue too much, so I had to text instead. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you can definitely scrape your tongue with your toothbrush. I don't think you have to do the whole
Did
thing.
you say you do that, or you've heard of that? You do
My
that?
dentist told me to do it.
And what is the point of that again?
It gets all the gunk off your tongue and your cheeks. And you're supposed to do your tongue and the roof of your mouth.
You are?
I never did the cheeks and my inside
Wow,
cheeks, but
that's
the woman
amazing.
just talked about that. Yeah, it's cleaning your teeth in the morning, Jim.
Wow.
Peter in Arlington, what do you do?
Peter in Arlington, yeah.
Oh, hi, good. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've been part of the 5 a.m. club for 28 years now.
Wow.
It started when I started working at the Museum of Science. I was part of the exhibit design crew, and they all were in the shop at 5:30 in the morning, so I just started doing that so I could bike in from Arlington, get there with the crew. You know, I know they did it to beat traffic, also for getting that early, the public wasn't in, so we could install stuff. And just like it's about 25 years I worked there. I just every morning at 5 o'clock would get up, get on my bike, and bike in.
I totally get that part of it and sort of getting ahead of the curve kind of thing. But the thing that appeals to me about being up at 5 is different. Well, maybe it's not totally different. Is sort of the ability to sort of, as I said, ease into the day. You didn't ease into the day. You sort of rushed into the day. You just did it early, right?
Yeah, I guess in a sense that could be true. I mean, I bike right in along the Charles.
Oh, well, that's
a nice way to sort of.
That's a very good point.
And then also with that said, especially in the winter, we get out of work at like 3 or so.
Well, that's good
so
too.
that was
Yeah.
a nice ride home before it got dark, and
A lot of
I
time.
kind of felt like it was a way to actually get in and out of work.
I got it.
Sort of biking along the Charles.
That's a beautiful thing. Peter, thank you for the
People
call.
are really waxing rhapsodic about this. I'll read
About
you
which?
one more.
Getting up?
Yeah. I'm up at 5 a.m. every day with my dogs. Nothing better than walking at dawn when it's quiet, peaceful, meditating at a
great.
bench, sitting and watching with my dog as the city wakes up and the sun rise is the absolute best way to start your day. I'm an introvert, and people in crowds stress us out, so quiet early mornings work for me and my dogs. How do you like that one, Jim?
By the way, anybody who thinks Marjorie really gets up at 5:30,
I do.
should email us
Yeah,
at BPRW or tweet us
I'm
or
keeping a
text
low
us
profile
or do
at
something.
5:30, though, Jim. You know what's not on at 5:30?
Your phone.
My phone.
Is that really
correct.
true?
Yes, that is
I
correct.
I'm still don't believe
Okay,
it.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
You were fine too, by the way. You really were. And I'm Jim Browdy.
Thank you again for tuning.
Woods Hole, WJMF-FM, Smithfield, Providence, and at classical.org.
Just shy of 2 o'clock, Greg Farisi here with you. Thanks for having me. Dvorak's Serenade for Strings is coming up later this hour, and a little later on, Mozart's Jupiter Symphony. Here now, Emmanuel Piou and Christian Rivet with Bartok's Romanian folk dances.